Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order for the Corporation of Township of Flisland, October 9th, 2024. We'll start with roll call. Councilor Goyda.
Present.
Councilor Spoulos. Present. Councilor Bailey.
Here.
And Councilor Hurst. Present. This will begin our moment of reflection. That concludes our moment of reflection. So if I should have confirmation of the agenda, please.
The council approves the October 9th, 2024 agenda and addendum as circulated, and the council approves the addition to the agenda as follows. Consent item 6.1.4, questions received from council and the corresponding responses provided by staff.
Mover for that, please. Councilor Spoulos, Councilor Goyda. Questions or concerns? All in favor? That's carried. Do you have any disclosure of pecuniary interest today? Councilor Goyda.
Yes, I have two. First one is item 9.3.2, which is priority properties intention to designate. Specifically 4726 Watson Road South is a property that is owned by my parents, and therefore I have a conflict in making decisions as it relates to that particular address and the designation. And also item 10.3, which is the county planning committee regarding rural residential growth. As this report speaks to hamlet expansions, I have a potential pecuniary interest as my employer has an active planning application under review that will fall under the rural growth.
Thank you, Councilor Goyda. Any other disclosure of pecuniary interest? Can we remove her parents' property from heritage designation? Or you'll deal with the second one, please?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so first up, we have our first delegation. Ms. Jean.
Hey.
Yeah, come on down in the hot seat.
Okay. I have some slides here. Thank you so much.
You can start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Jean Hopkins. I'm the manager of the Wellington Bulk Drug Strategy. And I have 10 minutes today, which is not a lot of time to share information about sort of what it is that the drug strategy does, and also some current trends that we're seeing within our community, as well as some of what the drug strategy is doing to minimize some of the harms that we're seeing in our community as it relates to substance use. So I'm going to scratch the surface, but I'm available for any questions or any comments that you might have, and please feel free to reach out. I can leave my card. So next slide, please. So I'm going to share just a little bit of information about the drug strategy. We are a coalition of partner agencies and members of the lived experience community, and we're working to implement a 4-pillar drug strategy in the municipalities of Wellington County and the city of Guelph. The 4 pillars you can see here. And as I think we know, these 4 pillars that you see here often intersect. And so I like to really consider them as being areas of focus as opposed to standalone pillars, because there are obviously quite a bit of intersection between all of those. And we have representation from organizations that fall under these 4 pillars as a part of the work that we do as well. Next slide. Our mission is to take action to prevent and respond to local substance use issues, and we do that by taking on projects that fall under the 4 pillars that you see here. We were founded in 2006, and were administered by the Guelph Community Health Center and funded through CBAs from the city of Guelph and the county of Wellington. We also have additional funding that comes through for project-specific grants, some of which I'll talk a little bit about today. Next slide. In terms of our structure, you'll see here some of our key committees. I'm not going to speak to all of them, but I'll highlight our peer advisory committee. And this is made up of members of the lived and living experience community. And they really guide not only our work, but also inform some of the key projects that are within some of our coalition agencies and partner agencies in an advisory capacity. And so we're really grateful to have the peer advisory committee support some of our work. We also have a management committee which provides strategic direction and decision-making support as well. And that's comprised of leadership from organizations that fall under those 4 pillars. So EMS, Guelph Police Services, Guelph Community Health Center, for example. And then we're also engaged in the Drug Strategy Network of Ontario. So that is a network of drug strategies from across the province. There's about 40 drug strategies across the province. And we meet on a regular basis to share information and to collaborate on projects and really provide sort of a comprehensive understanding as to what we're seeing across the province as it relates to substance use. Next slide. I really just want to take a moment here to talk about some of the language that I'm going to be using as I speak about some of the trends that we're seeing. And there's been a real shift away from using the term overdose and shifting that over to drug poisoning. And the reason for that is twofold, right? I think that overdose often sort of implies that someone might be using too much of a substance or taking something in too large of a dose. It implies what the person might know, what they're taking, what they're consuming, whereas drug poisoning, and that's what we're seeing in our community, really speaks to the fact that the illicit drug supply is toxic and it's unpredictable. Additionally, we also use person-first language. That is a way in which we minimize stigma, and it really describes a person what they might be experiencing as opposed to what that person is. This photo is also from Drug Poisoning Awareness Day, which is an event that we hold each year, and that's held in alignment with International Overdose Awareness Day. And again, we shifted the language last year to Drug Poisoning Awareness Day as well, and those events are held in Guelph and in Mount Forest. Next slide. I'm going to speak a little bit about opioids and the unregulated drug supply. I'm sure you're all aware of what opioids are. I assume everybody in this room has, had some sort of medical procedure where regulated opioids have been prescribed. We know that they are very effective for pain management, both physical and emotional pain. And we know that the substances that we're seeing that are unregulated, that are being purchased at a street level, we know that they are highly unpredictable. We know that they're increasingly toxic. And I like to sort of think about it through the use of a chocolate chip metaphor. So when you're baking chocolate chips, you have a batch and you're not necessarily sure how many chocolate chips are in each one of those cookies. And that's similar to what we're seeing with the unregulated drug market right now. Next slide. And I'll just sort of demonstrate that through some of the data that we have currently. And so this is from the FAST Overdose Alert platform, which we work really closely with public health to ensure that we have accurate and up-to-date information on the harms associated with substance use within our community. So as you'll see here, last year in 2023, we had 62 fatalities from substance use. And this year we have approximately 30. And again, this is up-to-date information. Last year we had 458 drug poisoning incidents. And again, those incidents are usually incidents where medical assistance is required. So, EMS is called, naloxone is administered, oxygen is provided, and so on. That said, we expect those numbers to be underreported because that comes through our community partners, EMS and police, for example. Next slide. And I also think it's really important to talk a little bit further about what we mean when we're talking about drug toxicity. What does that actually mean? And this is information from Toronto's Drug Checking Service. Again, up-to-date information on what we're seeing from 156 samples that were checked. And of substances that were checked during this period, 22% of those expected fentanyl samples were known to be associated with an overdose. 90% contain fluorofentanyl, which is a high-strength opioid, which is stronger than fentanyl. And then I want to just highlight here too, 52% contain a benzodiazepine-related drug and a veterinary tranquilizer, 42% xylazine, most likely, is what we see there. And I want to highlight those two because those do not respond to naloxone. Naloxone is only effective with opioid medications, so or opioids. So that's a really important component, and we're starting to see more and more of that here as well. Next slide. Which brings us to health alerts. So you've probably seen these. This is something that we circulate out when there are concerns around a contaminated drug supply, people who might be experiencing drug poisonings. Again, very much informed by the work that we do with many of our community partners, and we circulate these alerts when there is reason for concern, and we want to share that out to the community and to service providers and people who use substances. I'll just highlight here in February, there were 7 drug poisoning incidents in a very short period of time. You'll also probably recall that in February, there was a emergency alert that was issued, or emergency declaration rather, that was issued in Belleville as a result of a number of drug poisoning incidents as well. And at that time, there was 9 alerts that were circulated across the province. We actually sent one out on Friday. We had a health alert that was circulated just this past Friday as a result of 9 substance-related poisonings in 3 days. Next slide. I want to take a moment, though, to speak to some of what we're doing and some of our recent initiatives. We're quite busy right now. And one of the projects that we take on that falls under the education pathway is a partnership with EMS and Guelph Community Health Center staff with lived experience. And this is for incoming paramedics. And we provide a workshop on best practices in administering naloxone and supporting members of our community who have experienced a drug poisoning. So what does that look like afterwards? What sort of supports can be offered or referred out? And that's through the lens of lived experience as well. And one of the key goals is to minimize stigma, right? And to build skills. Next slide. In addition to that, we have also been doing quite a bit of work around sort of the knowledge exchange pathway as well. So these are photos from a harm reduction forum, Reducing Harms Building Community, a Wellington County conversation that was held in May of this past year. It was a terrific event. We had about 100 people in Fergus come out for this event to learn more about a wide range of things, right? First and foremost, what is harm reduction and what does that mean? What are we seeing within our community as it relates to substance use? What services are available and how can we best support people in our community who use substances? And this really came from a number of community members all across the county saying, you know, we're seeing an increase in harms related to substance use, and we want to have a sense of what we can be doing as a community to respond and to support people and keep people safe. We also had a naloxone training there as well, which you'll see here. So next slide, please. Okay. And I'll wrap up just by sort of speaking to the fact that there are a number of changes that are going to be taking place in our community. As I'm sure you're well aware, on August 20th, there was an announcement that 10 consumption and treatment services across the province would be closed down, including the CTS that we have at the Guelph Community Health Center. And we don't know what the outcomes of that will be, but there are concerns that we will see an increase in fatalities and pressures on some of our other healthcare services within Guelph. So something that we're definitely considering and working towards sort of making sure that we have risk mitigation in place and thinking through what some projects might look like. So these are a few of the initiatives that we have on the go coming up for the rest of the year and into next year. And as you can see here, there's quite a bit of collaboration with a number of key partners within Guelph and Wellington. And again, we're really wanting to emphasize naloxone training for anybody and everybody. And if that's something that you're interested in, please, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. But again, it's a really low barrier way that people can be informed and can have tools and skills related to preventing overdoses and minimizing stigma in our community. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions. I'm not sure if I went over 10 minutes. I apologize if I did, but yeah, please reach out if there's any questions.
Well, thank you for your speedy presentation.
Quite a bit.
Councilor Goyette.
Yeah, thanks for coming today. I know it was short, but great presentation. I mean, I learned a lot just in that short little amount of time. I think, yeah, it's scary to learn about sort of the harms that are coming to our community as it relates to drug use. And we're talking about specifically the fentanyl that contains certain drugs that don't respond to naloxone. That's scary stuff. It's good to be reminded of that. So thank you for coming and thank you for all of the work that you're doing to bring awareness and prevention and reduction to the community. The one thing I wanted to ask you is you showed on there the health alerts that how do those get out? Like how does that
great
get
question.
out into the community?
Actually, if you can put up the slides again. Sorry about that. I actually included a sort of a sneaky slide at the very, very end there that actually walks through the FAST system and what that protocol looks like. But in short, again, we work really closely with public health on this, and we have a number of community partners that provide information that they're seeing in real time as it relates to drug poisoning incidents. So the very last slide, it's 14, slide 14. This is actually the FAST alert system and how that functions. So again, we receive information in real time from community partners, whether that's EMS, health and social service organizations that are involved in this system, police services as well. Those incidents are then submitted to public health. We monitor that data. We have an understanding as to what's happening. Again, a lot of the time we're kind of communicating with one another if we're seeing something concerning within the community. And then from there, we decide on sending out a health alert. And again, just given, sort of what I shared with you around what we're seeing in our drug supply and the fact that it's changing so quickly. And, often we will also send out warnings if we're seeing something new within the drug supply. We're also thinking through, do we need a rapid response plan? If there is an incident that is similar to what we saw in Belleville, is there something that we need to be doing to sort of think through, how we would respond? So that this is a helpful infographic, but I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, I was wondering, just as a follow-up, does that, I think of like local high schools, for instance, would that information be distributed through the school or maybe university?
Yeah, great question. So in terms of distribution, we send that out on our social media channels. We have a wide-ranging distribution list with multiple organizations. And again, our committee is comprised of organizations that fall under those 4 pillars. That includes schools, that includes universities. And so all of that information is disseminated out and shared widely in the community, whether it's on social media or often you'll have alerts that are printed out and posted in various places. So yeah. And again, if that's something that you're interested in being on the distribution list for, please reach out and I'm happy to add you to the list. Yeah, so you'll be aware of upcoming or future health alerts.
Yeah. Councilor Spillis?
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. So you can know your organization existed till now. In terms of what we can do as council, what would you suggest that we can do as council to make our residents more aware of your program and all that,
Yeah.
all the avenues are open.
That's a really great question. And again, I sort of think back to what our pathways are. And I named, education and knowledge exchange, because I think that those are really powerful tools for getting information out there, not just in terms of sort of what we're seeing, but also ways in which we can support people in our community that might be struggling with substance use and might be looking for, additional supports, whatever that might look like for them to meet their individual goals. I think that the harm reduction forum that we held in May was a really great first step, and there's definitely an appetite for more events along those lines. So yeah, I think that might be one really excellent way. I think individual advocacy is also really helpful, and for all of you being in leadership positions, normalizing being trained in naloxone can be really effective as well, and sharing information about where people can go to be trained and to receive a free kit are all really effective strategies as well.
Okay, if you made a presentation to the county at the social services and
We have in the past, yeah, I haven't in the past year. I'm going there this afternoon. And I think I'm on their list at some point. Again, I think that there's a lot of changes that are happening within our community as it relates to social services. And I know that there are some representatives from various organizations that are presenting, I believe today and at future meetings, but certainly something that I'm open to, absolutely.
just, of course, on the staff, is there a way we could make our community more aware that this particular program is available?
So if you, Mr. Chair, I think what I've heard is we can push out some messaging and some
Absolutely.
information through our website and our social platforms, and I think that
That would be excellent. Yes, yeah, I would support that. Yeah, happy to, yeah. Yeah, and please follow us on social media as well. We provide updates on a regular basis, and yeah, that would be excellent. Yeah. Our website also contains a number of fact sheets and up-to-date information as well that can be shared out as well. So yeah, please take a look at our website and feel free to share any information.
Councilor Bailey?
Okay, thanks for coming, team. I guess just more of a comment, but something I struggle with is we see all the statistics, we hear about what's happening in the city centers, we see the evidence, but here in Puslinch, we don't see anything happening.
Yeah.
And so I actually shared your alert on Friday, was it Friday that it came out?
Mhm.
And part of me struggled with sharing something that's so scary.
Yeah.
When I don't know how many people in the community even know it exists.
Yeah.
Right, so then having that, is it meaningful? Like, is sharing something so scary, meaningful when we're not actually seeing it, in
Yeah.
Puslinch? So anyway, I'm struggling with what we can't see, but knowing it's there. Like,
Yeah.
it's wondering, like Councillor Sopolos was saying, how can we help when we don't see it?
Yes,
You know?
and I would gently challenge that and say, just because we're not necessarily seeing it doesn't mean that it's not there, right? And I think that a lot of people are struggling. A lot of people are using, a wide range of substances, and perhaps we're just not seeing it as out in the open as we are in maybe other communities. And I think that was one of the main reasons why we moved ahead with the harm reduction forum in Fergus, and with a specific focus on the county, was because we were hearing a lot of that, right? There's a lot of people that are struggling. We might not necessarily see it as much, but we know that it's happening, and we want to have, the skills to be able to support people and to respond as a community. So to that, I would say, information is really powerful, and it also serves to not only get information out and support people, but also to minimize stigma and to say this is something that we can be communicating, but this is something that we can be talking about. And I agree with you. Some of this information is quite alarming, but it's happening. And I think that it's also a matter of talking about and having accurate, up-to-date information to share.
What age do you think is appropriate to be teaching youth how to use naloxone kits?
Great question. I think there's so many Yeah, there's lots of considerations there. That's such an excellent question. And I think it would depend on, you know, what the circumstances are, what the situation is, you know, where you would be delivering that training. I think, again, more and more, we're seeing naloxone normalized in various different spaces. So as an example, under the sort of basic first aid training that you have with, you know, larger organizations like the Red Cross or St. John's Ambulance, they're now including naloxone training as well as a part of their sort of, you know, first aid 101. That doesn't answer your question. It's hard to give us, you know, a specific age, but I would argue, I think, you know, as soon as conversations around substance use are happening within, you know, either the school system or the growth hubs or among, you know, community members, that naloxone be embedded into that conversation as well. Yeah.
I'm just asking as chair of youth committee, when we met Monday night, I mean, everyone's sitting around the horseshoe, they're all high school age.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if maybe it's appropriate to, you know, have that question for the chief. You're gonna be doing some first aid training in-house. Does that include naloxone training? And if not, can we
Can it be?
add it in?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes and no. So I'm with you. It depends on the group and the age. So we can have that discussion after.
Sure.
Right now, I know Red Cross offers it. There's lots of people that do, so we can look at it.
Okay, and I assume the trucks have, like, your trucks have naloxone? No?
It's a delegated authority once you become fire.
So you can't,
Not right now. We're working on it.
oh, interesting, okay.
And if there's anything I can do to support with any initiatives or any education around that, I'd be happy to. Yeah.
Okay, and then just a final comment, I mean, I attended the forum, I thought it was fantastic.
Excellent.
I got to do my naloxone training, where I had not had an opportunity, you know, it's not that it was just never available to me until I went to that, and I encourage you to do another one. If you can do it in different parts of the county even, like, I thought that was really fantastic, so good job to your
Excellent.
group
Thank you.
there. Thanks.
First.
Yeah, thanks, Jean. I would probably echo Councillor School's comments. I wasn't aware of the initiative and the group, so this is quite beneficial. Couple really quick questions from my standpoint. Can you maybe just talk about the lived-in experience peer advisory committee and what function that group has in providing direction to the initiatives? And then the sub piece of that is, have you had any engagement from Coast Township in the past on that in the committee, or just maybe speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the peer advisory committee, again, is members of the lived and living experience community, mostly comprised of peers that work within the substance use space and various substance use organizations within the community. So Stonehenge, CHC as an example. Some of those organizations hire peers to support clients. And that group really supports a lot of the work that we do in providing information about the lived experience community and the ways in which various projects that we take on might be the most impactful to people who are currently using substances. They have also taken on a number of initiatives as a group as well. So as an example, last May of 2022, was it 2023? Sorry, I'm getting my years mixed up. Anyway, they had a film screening called Love in the Time of Fentanyl that was led by the peer advisory committee, and they're often very involved in a number of initiatives, including Drug Poisoning Awareness Day as well, and leading some of those initiatives. So, yeah.
Thanks. Can you maybe speak to, I'm sensitive not to be insensitive to
Sure.
this. The experiences within your group and, you know, similarities or differences between the city of Guelph and the townships?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, great question. I will speak to, and this is something that again came up in the harm reduction forum. There are a significant number of differences both in terms of, I would say, services within the county versus, in Guelph, and the ways in which people access them. So as an example, downtown Guelph, you have a number of services, both in terms of substance use supports, and also supports to meet basic needs, whether that's, food or accessing showers and so on. That's difficult in the county, right? People often have to, travel long distances to access supports. One of the pieces that we heard from the harm reduction forum is that there is more stigma potentially in more rural and remote communities where people might see each other more often and there's less anonymity. So those are some of the key pieces that definitely came up for us and we were speaking about and addressing within the harm reduction forum and challenges that are in the county. I'll note here too, one of the really fantastic organizations that's involved in the drug strategy is the Sanguine Health Service or Sanguine Community Health Service. They have a mobile van that goes to multiple different locations across the county on a weekly basis, providing health information. There's a nurse on staff and distributing harm reduction supplies. So they are absolutely terrific and really meeting a need within the county to meet people where they're at.
That's helpful, because I think I sense there's differences,
Yes.
there's commonalities,
Yeah.
and just being cognizant of how
Absolutely.
you making sure that you're accessible to people that need the services or supporters.
Mhm.
So I'm glad to hear that. Maybe my last one, and you spoke to it a little bit. I was curious when you were giving your presentation, this is where my head went, is, your reaction to the provincial government's, transitioning away from the safe use locations and, probably the timing may not be appropriate to kind of share what the go forward strategy is within the county, but I think that would be one. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Because you have to go through the appropriate processes, but it would be interesting at some point to hear what the go forward strategy is within
Yeah.
within your group and how that may impact both the city, but also the
Absolutely.
rural townships that surround the city.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. We're sort of in the information gathering stage, and there is an application that is going in for a Heart Hub model, which is what the government proposed during that same announcement, where they also spoke to the CTS closures across the province. And at this point, it's still early days, but that's absolutely something that I would be happy to speak to in future. And I know actually today at the county and city of Guelph Joint Social Services and Land Ambulance Committee meeting, that's something that's going to be discussed today as well. So happy to provide updates and happy to come back at another time to speak to that once we have more of an understanding as to what that'll look like. Yeah.
Thanks. That's it for me. I appreciate you taking the time to come today. This is quick.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
So my question for you is the education component of it. What's the messaging that's being pushed to our youth or maybe the not youths?
Mhm.
But I don't want a whole train scenario, but just like the high level kind of.
Yeah, great question. And again, it depends, I think, on the group. It depends on the organization that would be, delivering various trainings, depends on what the needs are. So that's a very difficult question to answer. And I will say, I think that the previous messaging that that was maybe being used around, just say no to drugs. We know that the evidence points to the fact that that might not necessarily be as effective as what was previously thought. And generally speaking, and again, this is quite general, it's about informed decision-making, right? And so providing young people with accurate evidence-based information about substances and about the impacts that has, so that young people, if they do choose to engage in substance use, have, again, access to accurate information and know where to go if, there's additional supports that might be needed and necessary for them and for their peers as well. Yeah.
So recognizing the stats you provided, I mean, you work with the data that you can get, so very familiar with the issue in the community.
Mhm.
you know, I've witnessed where we respond and then the person just gets up
Yep.
after some stimulation and walks away.
Yep.
And then it becomes problematic. Do you arrest them? Do you not? So does that count towards stats? So just taking your stats as what you provided,
Mhm.
it's alarming because the previous year, 23, I think there was 60 poisonings, and I think the number was around 400 calls. So my concern is
Mhm.
that the attrition of people passing away is not outpacing the new addicts. So the education component, I think is such a priority.
Absolutely. Yep.
So for me, one of the, maybe unintended, benefit of legalizing marijuana is that we now have government-controlled
Mhm.
dispensaries. So I think part of the, messaging, and I'm not qualified to be saying this whatsoever, but is that if you have a youth and if you're gonna dabble in the recreational drugs, marijuana, soft drugs, whatever you wanna label them.
Sure.
I feel we should be steering them towards the more
Regulated.
expensive Ontario distribution versus the black market, because
Yeah.
what you're indicating is, you know, we don't know how much fentanyl's in it.
Yeah.
And that will maybe, because so the other component is if you use fentanyl, I don't think you can tell if you're predisposed to become addicted to it immediately. Does it take 3 times, 4 times? Maybe it's not addiction, whatever you want to call it. But
Mhm.
so anyways, the education component of steering people to those dispensaries versus the street drugs.
Yeah. There's a lot there.
Right.
There's a lot there. So I heard a couple of pieces that I can speak to here, and I think you're absolutely right. I think that what we know about regulated substances, including alcohol and cannabis, alcohol through LCBO and you know, cannabis through various regulated dispensaries, is that there are quality control mechanisms in place that keep people safe. Right, and that's why they exist, is to know that, you know, you have a label that has information about what is in what you are consuming. And I would suggest that that's informed decision-making. And so I think you're absolutely right. That's a really important component of any sort of education that we do is, you know, there are risks to consuming substances from an unregulated market. There's risks with unregulated as well, but with a regulated substance, we know what that looks like. So I think you're absolutely right, and that's definitely a really important part of, again, that informed decision-making piece as well. I think when we're also talking about unregulated opioids as well, I'll just also note that it's not necessarily just within opioids, it's not just within opioids. So as a result of, you know, the health alerts that we send out, often we're seeing contaminated substances where someone might be consuming, say, I don't know, a university student who's potentially consuming a party drug on the weekend might have fentanyl or other high strength opioids in it, right? And so it's also those pieces as well that we need to also consider. All of that to say is yes. I think that many of your points are quite valid there, and there is absolutely less risk with regulated substances for sure.
Yeah, I just, for me, I'm so heavy on the education components of trying to get that attrition rate down so that less where people are becoming dependent on these drugs. And you know, this is not a joke, but it's alarming that somebody is producing a product that ends up killing their customer.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure why they haven't put their own checks and balances, because that's not in anybody's interest that your customer dies from your product.
Yeah.
So even if the people producing it would get, you know, as awful as it sounds, at the end of the day, we want to save people. If they could produce a product that doesn't kill them, everybody, and then we just work on educating people not to get onto the product. So
Mhm.
it's because I've seen it, where in a 24-hour window, there was 20 poisonings
Mhm.
in Guelph. And this was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Belleville had 9, and they made an emergency. So I'm glad we're going in that direction, informing people, but
Sure.
I think it's challenging that my understanding is the way you become aware is when people start getting poisoned. And by then it's already in the hands of the end user. So how do you,
Mhm.
unless you actually have one person say, this is the one I use, then at least you can say, hey, if you have this in your pocket, don't use it because it's a bad batch for, you know, simple
Yeah.
terms, right? It's so problematic once it's in the hands of the community
Yeah.
that you almost have to weather the storm and, deal with it on a case by case until so it's a very difficult problem to solve.
It is, absolutely. And I think that's why the drug strategy takes that 4-pillar approach, right? Because we recognize that all 4 of those pillars, so harm reduction, treatment and recovery, prevention, and community safety, need to be working in tandem with one another and collaborating on solution. Just on one final point too, on the informed decision making too, I think that there's some really fantastic harm reduction tools that we have in our community. So as an example, the Sanguine van that I mentioned, they have test strips on their vans so that people can test their substances and make informed decisions. And then at the Guelph Community Health Center, there's also the scatter drug testing machine as well, where people can provide a very small sample and get a read on what might be in that sample, and then make, again, informed decisions about what they consume or how as a result. Yeah.
So last couple comments is my understanding is that the city of Guelph did not fund the health van for the city. That's why it's only operating in the county for budgetary reasons. Now that test strip component I had not heard until just now. So I would suggest, along with the closure of the safe injection sites, a presentation to the city of Guelph on the importance of that van. Because it ends up being less pressure on the emergency room, the hospitals, all of those things. So, another budget season coming up, so just tell them what to do. And then I forget my other point, so, I remember. So my understanding naloxone, if you're having a poisoning of anything else other than an opioid, it doesn't have an effect on you, so. But if you are having an opioid poisoning and you administer it to an individual, if we're going to consider training our youth to use that, if we're gonna train them on that, I think they need to be made aware or have training on to deal with the patient post administration of the naloxone.
Of course, yeah.
They don't always wake up happy.
Mhm.
And then you have youth that are now in a very compromising situation, so I understand the use of naloxone, there's parameters, and it's changed a few times in my tenure, and it may be different now, because I've been out for a while, but I just want staff to take that into consideration. It's not just, oh, yeah, they qualify here, then what? So, recognizing that component of it, but thanks for the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and please reach out with any additional questions. Thank you very much.
So the council receives the delegation for information. The council directs staff to share information related to the initiatives of the Wellington Guelph Drug Strategy on the TMS website and social media platforms to help bring awareness.
Please, Councilor Goyda. All in favor?
Thank you very much.
Great. Next, we're gonna go to our speed limit study. Pending version, yeah.
Yeah, Joshua. Before.
Let's see, there he is. Welcome, Joshua.
Thank you for having me.
He didn't have a presentation, so it's the information that was provided in the package, and then Joshua is here for questions from council.
All right, I'll turn it over to you, Joshua, if you have some introductory comments, and then we can open up to council.
Sure. Thank you. I'm a project manager with the consulting firm Paradigm Transportation Solutions Limited. We were retained by the township of Lynch to prepare a speed limit study on roads, all roads within the township that have speed limit of 6 or higher. So this is the rural roads in the township. Through the study, we visited each road, we recorded data, and we ran that through a standard process in the engineering industry through the Transportation Association of Canada guidelines. And we developed speed limits for each section of every road that was within the study. And from there, we took into account the local context and we reviewed the roads further, one by one to make sure the limits and the speeds for each road were accurate as we saw them. And from there, we produced a report in maps, figures, and tables to demonstrate the recommended speed limits for each road. So that's essentially what's in our report. It's quite a lengthy report. It also contains recommendations on next steps and how to go about maintaining the speeds and the strategy going forward. So that's a brief outline of the study and our process.
Great, thanks, Joshua. I'll have you read the resolution, please, Ms. Whitefox.
All right, so that agenda item 9.5.2, Township of West Lynch speed study be received, and the council endorsed the recommendations outlined in the speed study as follows: adopt the posted speed limits contained herein, review the need for advisory speed limit signage on the township road network, adopt a speed management plan to monitor and evaluate motorist compliance and identify focus areas for speed limit enforcement and or further review. And the council directs staff to report back during the 2025 budget process with a signage plan indicating where all posted speed limit signs are to be installed and the associated costing. And the council directs staff to review the township road management plan to determine if the current plan includes adequate processes for monitoring and evaluating speed management.
All right, and move that, please. Council Spoulos, Council Hurst. All right, is there any other comments you want to add prior to the opening of the council?
There was a number of questions from council that have been answered by our consultants, and they're in the package and been posted on the website. And so that information is for council's consideration in terms of some of the monitoring and additional work that could take place.
Councilor Gordon?
Thank you. This is, I just wanted to start by saying this is a really good report. I appreciate that it's written in sort of very plain language. It's very easy to understand. And I think there's a lot of value to the fact that each road segment was evaluated sort of like on site, like a windshield survey, like you said. So the information is really boots on the ground as opposed to just sort of desktop evaluation. And I think sort of given that extensive windshield survey and the sort of the very methodical way of evaluating each road section, I have really no technical reason to suggest anything other than the speed limits that are being proposed. I think it will be overall very well received by our residents. In most cases, there's a recommended reduction in speed. And so from that perspective, I think the public will see that as a positive thing. All that being said, although I don't necessarily disagree with any of the recommended speed limits, I don't feel that I have a good understanding of the cost of implementing all these speed limit signs. And so I'm wondering, like the report said that there's 62% of the road network will require new signage. And so while I don't know what the cost of that is, my gut is telling me that's not going to be an insignificant amount. And so I'm just curious, and I'm not sure if this was part of the analysis or part of any of the discussion, but is this something that we could look at phasing in over time? And when I say that, where my mind is kind of going with that is there's a sort of a array of roads that are currently unposted with no signage at all. Would it make sense to sort of look at those roads first, to implement signage on the currently unposted roads, review, monitor how that goes, and then look at phasing in the next part of it? Was that part of your review at all?
That's an excellent point and an excellent question. At other municipal councils, this is one of the key points that comes up is this cost to go out day one and do everything. I think the solution I've seen in the past is through the capital road program. When it's time to repave or reconstruct a road, the speed is considered through the study. And then also having the targeted program, like you said, to prioritize key locations. In terms of costing, we didn't get exact costs from the study. That would come through the signage plan and then determination of whether this is done internally or contracted, and how much is done at once. I think if I recall, there's 49 roads and 174 road segments. So if you think each road segment needs at least 2 signs, you're looking at approximately at least 500 signs if you did it all at once. That's quite a bit of work. Yeah, so like I said, a targeted approach based on priority, and then also rolling this out through a capital road program will allow you to have a plan in place day one, but then target the priority areas first.
Okay, that's good to hear. Follow-up question to that. In the report, one of the additional considerations that was touched on was the idea of sort of consistency and cohesiveness. And there was a comment about transitional speed limit changes and how it can be confusing for drivers and may result in a lack of respect for posted speed limit. And I believe in the report that's more in reference to transitions from sort of rural to urban areas. But I'm wondering if, again, as part of the review, if there was any consideration or discussion about the idea of perhaps a blanket speed limit, whereas like the whole speed limit with the whole township, other than the roads that are existing at 50, would just go to a blanket speed limit of 60 to keep it consistent. I don't know, is that
Yes.
something that?
Yeah, that's another excellent point. As an engineer, I love that idea of a consistent speed limit throughout the township. The roads are not all built the same. Some are next to bodies of water, some have vertical and horizontal curves where it's not necessarily doable. I think the township can strive, not that it's already happening, but in the standards to make sure each road or each class of road is designed the same way. I think what's a little difficult for the road network is some of the roads came about quite a while ago versus some newer roads, and when they're updated, there's different design standards. So I think through the redevelopment of these roads, having that consistent design standard, and the township can then get a uniform network. I think another issue is the urbanization and any development or changes that does come about. That typically takes residents some time to adjust to the surrounding land use and any new speeds that are implemented. And the last point I will make, I have seen municipalities implement policies for consistent speeds for a certain type of road, and that definitely could be an option here.
I have just 2 more questions. The TAC is recommending the road authority conduct a review of traffic operations and safety performance 6 to 12 months after the posted speed limit is modified. And I'm just wondering, what does that look like? Like, how would that review be done? Is that something that we would hire a consultant to do? Is that something that would happen in-house? I'm just trying to get an idea of, I guess, potentially the cost and the resources that may be required from the township in order to complete that review.
Yeah, so there's options that exist. what I've seen in municipalities is a program each year to collect what we call operating speeds. So this is the 85th percentile of speeds that are occurring on a specific road. So that is one option to target these priority areas, collect the data, and understanding those results will let the township know where they need to focus attention, or perhaps there aren't any speeding issues for that data collected. And then there's also a more intensive study that can be done called an in-service road safety review. And this would be for a particular corridor, and it would essentially get more details of the specific corridor, and it would make recommendations in terms of traffic calming or geometric design changes, signage and pavement markings. So yeah, that's a more intensive study, and that typically is done to address specific problems that have been identified.
So there's a question for you, Ms. Leo. Do we have access to the equipment that we would need to monitor the speeds of the traveling public on the roads? Is that what black cats are from the county? Do we have access to that, and how many do they have?
So through Mr. Chair, I don't think we've gotten a response back from the county about the potential for the township to utilize black cats. And then I think in the past, when we've collected road data, it's been through our consultants that we've had that work done.
Okay. So I do have one last question, and I'm not really sure if you will be able to answer this, and it's maybe a little bit offside, but the report, it indicated a review of the road surface conditions was completed based on the TAC guidelines. And the result of that was that 67% of the roads were considered to be either fair or rough, and 30.5% were poor or unpaved. But when we look at the pavement condition index that we did as part of the roads master plan 2022, that report said 63% of the road network was rated as good or very good. And so the reason I'm asking that question is just maybe less as it relates to speed limits, but more about whether like our roads deteriorating maybe more quickly than we realize. And again, I don't think that was really part of your review, but I do know that your firm was also involved in the roads master plan. So I'm just wondering how to reconcile sort of the condition of the roads as it relates to this study versus the roads master plan study.
Thank you for your comment. The pavement condition index, that is much more intensive process that there's a number of parameters to detail exactly which score for each segment of road, and that gets you your value. In terms of this study, this was done on an operational basis, so driving the road, and then thinking in terms of speeding. Is this road surface such that it's smooth enough where I would drive more quickly? So they are somewhat related, but in my opinion, they are slightly looking at different things. In the pavement condition index would be the one where you would really want to drill down on to see if there are issues with the road network as a whole, and if there's different strategies to address that.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know and good to hear. Thank you.
Mrs. Willis?
Thank you for undertaking the study. It's a very good study. Couple of questions of you and the staff. When you did all your segments, is there a priority of which segments you would recommend addressing first versus last?
That would come through, getting the operating speeds. So understanding what the operating speeds are right now versus the posted speed limit. So that would be one way. A second way would be where there aren't, where there isn't signage, currently. That is, would be a priority location. And then another approach to this would be through feedback through the community where they've identified concerns and township staff have confirmed that, or there's data to support these specific areas of concern. So most notably collision data. So if the township has collision data, they can they have on their own or through the police or through even hospitals. Those would be indicators of what the approach, where to look at first. So there's a few different aspects to consider in that respect.
Okay, that's very good, very good answer. Gives us some direction, gives staff on. I certainly agree with Councilor Goyder. We can't go at this all at once type of thing. It's going to be too expensive. Like I asked a couple of questions with respect to advisory speed, the two second recommendations you had. I come up with a figure up to 25,000 each based on the answer. So we're looking at $50,000 that plus the signage. I know when I first proposed 60 kilometers across the board when I first came on council, the signage at that time was $100,000, 97,000. So I'm sure it's gone up considerably. So anyway, so there's a lot of cost involved, and it's certainly a stage approach. I think is very much warranted and based on the prioritization of staff being appropriate. It's a question of you. Courtney, if we adopt the posted speed limits, what does that legally bind us? In other words, I really don't want to adopt it, and then we're not going to be there changing the sign until 5 years from now. Can we adopt it in principle, and as you roll it out year over year, then enact it, the necessary bylaws associated with a particular road?
Yes, so through Mr. Chair, I think coming back with sort of a strategic implementation plan after the study has been endorsed, that would allow council to look at which sort of areas or road segments they'd like to look at first. We could use data to back that up. And then we would have a bylaw that would officially change the speed brought to council, and we could sort of do that in accordance with whatever that sort of long-term strategy looks like. And then the costing then could be staggered. We could also look at staggering based on implementation year over year, that sort of operating speed analysis that was recommended for targeted areas. So it could be that staggered approach. And that could go 5 years, that could go over 10 years, whatever makes sense from a budget perspective.
Okay, so I would favor that approach, certainly. I need Bill to make the motion accordingly. Yeah, question, staff. Would it be appropriate to make this report available on, say, engaged Puslinch for the residents to generally comment on? I understand there would be a concern that we're going to get a lot of input, but at the same time, I think this is a study that affects everybody in the township, not just the previous, some of the other bylaws that we passed when you affect a certain segment of it. So what would your thoughts be on that?
So through Mr. Chair, I think from a staff perspective, it just comes back to the timing. I think we could potentially look at having public consultation take place into the new year. And perhaps as a corporate work plan item, we look at the strategic implementation plan. And that would sort of mean that there isn't the necessity to have a budget item in 2025 for signage. We're sort of shifting that consultation and the development of that strategic plan into 2025, with perhaps the first stage of a speed implementation happening in 2026.
So one question, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Bailey?
Thank you. A lot of my questions have been asked already. Thanks, to the counselors ahead of me. Yeah, the timing that staff just spoke to is, it does make sense in terms of how to phase something in. I do think we have a lot of, now that the study's been put out, I would think there'd be a lot of expectation from the public that we're going to implement something sooner than later. I do have a question on the roads that are unposted. If I can just get confirmation that unposted roads in the township are currently sitting at 80 kilometers an hour, is that correct? Okay, would one of the first phases that doesn't cost anything, can we just, and is it a bylaw we would have to do where we just say now the unposted roads are at 60? Can something like that get implemented quickly?
So through Mr. Chair, and our consultant may have more, or our Director of Public Works, but once we pass a bylaw, because that bylaw is setting a speed limit that differs from the Highway Traffic Act, we would need to post the signage.
Even though it's not posted currently?
It's not posted currently because where roads are unposted, they are defaulted to the Highway Traffic Act, which is 80.
Okay. I do have a question. The study, and I think Councillor Goyda touched on it, it's recommended that the township develop a speed management policy to monitor and evaluate speed compliance. Can staff just speak to what type of monitoring is currently being done and what kind of information we get, whether it's sufficient, whether what we're already doing is enough to satisfy that recommendation?
So through Mr. Chair, we often will reach out to the OPP, and on a number of occasions we've asked for some information and some data that they have, specifically relating to speed, because the township does not enforce speed. There is, through our roads management plan, we do have an avenue for the public to submit complaints or requests and things like that. And we document them, and it is available on the township website, where you can see sort of what the staff response is. So there is a little bit of data collection around speed, but the township's response is always reach out to the OPP. That's your best avenue. As I understand it, they sort of collect information as it relates to speeding complaints, and that might that might result in an OPP officer going out and doing some monitoring in that location.
Okay, but if we wanted to target certain roads to collect the data, then that would be getting back to the Black Cat conversation about whether to purchase or to borrow or.
And through Mr. Chair, there's also the suggestion by Paradigm, our consultant, around that sort of operating analysis on targeted sections once a speed limit change has occurred.
Okay. Joshua, I think I heard you say when you were answering a question earlier, but just confirm, there wasn't any crash data used for this study, was there?
Correct. That was not part of the study.
Okay. Going through, I think all of these were asked already. Yep, I'm good. Thank you.
Councillor Hurst?
Thanks. I'd echo Councillor Bailey's comments. I think a lot of the main stuff for me had already been touched. I'm glad that there's feedback and costing, transition plan, priority roads, public consultation, I think is really important here. Because I'm still a little bit hung up on, I can just share a prime example. I live in concession 4. I think the average speed on concession 4 is about 110 type of thing, right? And so I'm concerned with reducing the speeds to 50 and 60 and having little enforcement, setting unrealistic expectations within the community. So we can say, great, put a 60 sign on concession 4. And if it's not being enforced, I'm envisioning a number of township residents saying, like, what was the whole process of doing this if we haven't addressed the speeding issue in the first place? So that's a tough thing to crack. And I would say on some roads, probably maybe 80 is fine in a good concession road that's well paved and it's good, sight lines and everything. So I'm struggling a little bit with, I don't disagree with the process. I think it's a really robust report. I'm struggling a little bit with the expectations and the reality of going through this process. So again, I'm not sure there's anything that Josh, I'm not sure how you answer that. It's probably an unanswerable question. I think the work you did was great and I have no issues with it, but I am struggling a little bit with the, so you go through this process and then so what? Everybody is inconvenienced by someone at 80 because it's a concession road that's not well traveled. Others are like, it's now 60, but I see traffic zooming up the road and there's no enforcement. And that's where I struggle with.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
All right, thanks, Councillor Hurst. I agree with going to the public, but I think it's fine to put on engaged Puslinch, but I'd also like to see us engage the public once we have it boiled down to, say, 3 options, status quo, maybe make the whole township 60, those 3 options, because then we're gonna get true feedback. My concern right now, if we go out right now, we're gonna get these onesies and twosies absolutely everywhere, and it's not gonna be really any consensus. So I'm fine with highlighting that we have this report, get some feedback now, but I hope that that's not the only engagement. Once we have it boiled down, let's go back out, even have a public meeting and say, here's what we're considering. Status quo because enforcement is challenging. Blanket 50, blanket 60, whatever the 3 set options are. Councillor, I'm gonna put you on the spot. You're one of the, even including staff, one of the last remaining iterations of when that 90,000 for the
Signs, yeah.
Now, was that because we'd have to put so many of them up? Do you have any background on that costing?
Well, I can dig into my files and try to find it for, the staff here, but, it's basically, I suggested that time 60 across the board, and, at that time, the CAO put a number of roughly, just under $100,000 for all the signs.
Yeah.
And I assumed it was gonna be 2 per road segment, whatever the case may be. There might have been numbers, I don't recall that exactly.
Okay.
But it was 60 across the board. It was turned down because the council at that time said, well, most of the roads are either 60 or 70, and to reduce a 70 to a 60, it's less than 10% reduction wide.
Okay, so we're having a couple conversations around here, and one of them is posting the whole township as a default 60. Now, the city of Guelph has a similar situation where it's default 50. My understanding is that you have to sign that at every entrance to the township. So that when you come into our township, it's on you to read that sign as traveling public. So I'd like staff to get some indication, because what I just heard from you there was that costing might have been to put speed limit 60 signs at every road.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
But it leads me into the next question. I want to ask Mike if he's available. We had asked for additional enforcement on a road. It was my understanding that it was a default 80, so not signed. And the feedback we received from the OPP is that they would not enforce that 80 because it wasn't signed. Now, I guess that's the first part of the question. Mike, if you could answer that, that's if my memory is serving me right, or if I'm.
For you, Mr. Mayor, yes, you're correct. I didn't get all the answers I was looking for either when I asked the OPP about that. Under the rural speed limits, it basically under the Highway Traffic Act, if it's not posted, it's assumed to be 80, and I was a little perplexed on why the OPP was actually confused about that. There's several county roads, regional roads that are 80 kilometers an hour with throughout the region that are not posted also. So to have that as an excuse as not being enforceable, I never got a final answer on.
Okay, so I would like to consider doing a blanket posting of the speed limit, but I need staff to formally ask the OPP if they can enforce it without the signs in place on each segment. Because then we could, as we get, say, resident concerns and complaints of a section that's 60, then we sign that one. Or there could be a process that we, we'll roll this out through the township, so then we don't have to put up all these 60 signs right away. We can do 10% per year, 20% per year, something along those lines. But the actual speed limit is 60 everywhere, or whatever, wherever we land, 60, 50, those kinds of things. Because I agree with Councillor Hirsch's concerns that this is going to bring enforcement problems. However, the OPP has been very proactive in, I'd say the last year and a half, 2 years. They've, before we could request the black cats, there would be identified, additional enforcement. And then there wasn't really anything in place officially on what that meant. And now they have a process in place that's identified through the black cat. So I would encourage us to stay with that process. We already pay through our taxes for those black cats they have for that management. To develop our own program is similar to us having to enforce the ARA, because the MNR hasn't been addressing our concerns around illegal uses in the area. So we're duplicating things. So the less duplication we can do, the better for our taxpayers. So I would support, or hope council could support, whatever we do for speed limits, at least giving the current process for speed management a fair shake, until we see that maybe it's not working. But definitely reach out to the OPP for that confirmation. Oh, Mike, I think part of costing for signs, there's more to it than just the signs. What's the costing for the post, if you had to put a round number on it? Post, the new sign, and the installation? Because we could order, was there 500 signs needed or something astronomical? But it's not just the sign, it's the hardware to put it up, dig the hole, put it in. Do you have an estimation?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I just actually did an updated calculation, with the actual sign being steel, not aluminum. The post, stub, and hardware, including staff time, is approximately $220 per sign.
Oh, plus we have to manage it. That drives me bonkers. All the provincial signs, they don't reflect light if you at all, and we have to make sure ours are up to standard. Anyways, so there's additional costs. That's a good idea, council, to keep in your mind on costing for those signs. But so going forward, what do you hear from council here?
So through you, Mr. Chair, what I've captured is I've revised the recommendation that's in the report. It's to endorse the posted speed limits contained in the report in principle, subject to public consultation. So rather than adopt, I'm just changing that word into endorse. And that council direct staff to report back with a signage plan indicating where all posted speed limit signs are to be installed and the associated costing. That council inquire with the OPP whether a bylaw that changes unposted speed limits to 60 is enforceable without posting signage at each location, so long as that gateway signage is posted saying where it's not posted in the township at 60. The council directs staff to review the township's road management plan to determine if the current plan includes an adequate process for monitoring and evaluating speed. The council directs staff to add the development of a strategic speed limit signage implementation plan into the corporate work plan for 2025. And the council directs staff to publish the township speed study on Engage Plus Lunch in order to seek public feedback.
So back to this component of a carpet speed limit, regardless of what it is. Is it possible for staff to do a determination of, or get direction on where those signs have to be? So, for example, it can't just be on Highway 6 South, because that's the main arterial road coming into the township, because you can come up a side road and then up in the township and then claim that you weren't aware. So do we have to get hard data on every possible avenue to enter the township and have that marked?
So I think I've captured it just by requesting clarification that if each location, so long as gateway signage is posted at each entrance to the township. So understanding is that every access point, is there certain access points? What does that look like in terms of what our requirement?
Is council comfortable with, so that approach is trying to get an understanding of whether it's enforceable and, how many signs are required to make a township-wide bylaw, then we can have the discussions about whether we do that, whether we do road segments, where we land for the actual, and is that what you're understanding? Like, these are kind of the three things we're still grappling with?
And through you, Mr. Chair, so I think we'll ask that. I think we'll have an answer to that hopefully in short order, which could sort of preclude the need for developing a strategic plan if that's the case. But having that direction in here so that at least we can take it away is helpful now. As I understand it, nothing's being included in the 2025 budget at this point because we're really focusing on that public feedback, which I think will help steer the direction that council maybe wants to go as well. So right now it's just a little bit more information gathering and then we'll bring something back to council likely in the new year.
Sure, so kind of,
Yeah, I have two questions. So in that resolution that you have written, it says that council endorse the speed limits as they're in this report. If we're doing that, if we're endorsing those speed limits, but also looking at options that would potentially differ from that, meaning a blanket speed limit, are we counteracting our own endorsement? But like, I guess what I'm asking is, should we be deferring the endorsement of the speed limits until we have all of the information to at least make a decision? Like, are we going with what's in the report? Are we going with blanket speed limit? Are we going with something else entirely?
So, Mayor, when you say something in principle, it doesn't mean, it's fait accompli. It just means you support it, subject to whatever comes up, so. I think that it's important that, the public knows that we've looked at it and we think it's about the right way to go, subject to whatever else comes up.
see both sides.
Maybe it just says, subject to the following.
Right, so through you, Mr. Chair, the way it's written now is it's supported or endorsed in principle, subject to the public consultation that'll take place. I do think it's important to endorse it. It's a data-driven study, and I think it's important that we support the data that's been provided, but there's the opportunity to improve it based on the public feedback and also budget constraints. It may be that we have to look at something a little bit different.
That's fair.
I like it.
The second question that I have is, so I know at this point, we're not looking for any really costs as a necessarily for 2025 budget, but I do think regardless of whatever the outcome of this ends up being, there's going to be some changes, some significant changes, and there's going to be a component of that that's going to require education. And like I was saying today, on my way driving here up Watson Road, I tried to drive 60 the whole way, and it was very challenging, and I needed to keep reminding myself, okay, no, 60, 60, 60, 60. So I think the enforcement is one piece, but I think the education is going to be another piece. In the village of Arkell, the county has just installed those solar radar speed awareness signs. I don't have data on it, but they seem to be doing a good job of being effective in helping with regulating the speed. So I'm wondering, as part of our 2025 budget discussions, if we could maybe understand what those speed signs cost and have a discussion at that time in terms of, do we need to purchase a bunch? Can we purchase two and build a program where we're purchasing more every year? Can they be moved from location to location? But I think looking ahead, we're going to need some tools to help and implement whatever the result is going to be.
So through Mr. Chair, as I recall, the direction that staff had gotten previously was to sort of defer looking at speed mitigation until the speed study was done.
Right.
So it could be that we can give some preliminary numbers during the budget cycle, but it also might be appropriate to incorporate that into our development of a strategic speed limit plan.
Right.
I think there's lots of opportunities, particularly if we do a phased-in approach, where we can, we had talked, with Councillor Bailey previously around those signs saying there's a new signage, new posted, speed, and sort of it's coming and, coming up in the next kilometer or so. And so I think staggering it makes it much more financially feasible to sort of rotate that around the township as we implement things. So it may be that we bring costing forward, but that be incorporated into the strategic plan.
Yeah, and that would be fine. I just,
Even just a placeholder, you can throw a few $1,000s on the sign budget line as one of the items we just, like, you highlight in our budget discussions. We've increased the sign budget by $2,000. That, as council knows, that's one of the ones we can strike out if, depending on how challenging the budget is. I think that's where you're going, just get a little bit of money in there. That way, if we need more signs or a few signs or any signs, or it's at least, right? So, am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, just, one, thing that council, staff may want to do is, Milton has a 60 across the board, so you may want to talk to them about their experience. I used to drive, the country when the 401 was jammed up and, used to get stuck at 60K. Good. That's it.
Councillor Bailey?
No, I'm good.
Councillor Hurst?
Really good comments. I look at this as a really good report, starting point, lots of public consultation to go.
Need to reread that?
I've added just to what I said previously, just to report back on the costing of the various speed mitigation tools in order to incorporate it into the budget or into the strategic plan that we're looking at.
Just on the OPP thing, I would like to receive it in writing, whether they can enforce it or not. I would not desire a verbal, and it's official, right? That's my understanding. Okay. Pretty good. We have a mover and a seconder for that?
We had Councillor Seclus move and Councillor Hurst second, but that was the original recommendation.
I still,
I'm good.
would like to move.
Okay, all right, all in favor? That's carried. All right, now I will back to delegations. Okay, you can make your way down to the table here. Working quick moment. Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
See you in person.
Yes, thank you for having me here today and for hearing my delegation. I brought my notes to read so that I make sure I don't forget anything. So my name is Jamie Kurtzweiser. I live at 4492 Watson Road South, and that's the topic that I'm here to talk about today. Since 2010, we owned, rehabilitated, and repurposed a long neglected building, 4492 Watson Road South. A building that long ago was used as a one-room schoolhouse before becoming a camp lodge for the Girl Guides. When we acquired the building, it was only worth land value. It was in as-in condition, and it was in much disrepair. We approached the township at the time for information on restrictions, given the fact that it was listed as a heritage property. And the only restriction that was noted was that we needed to give notice if we planned to tear it down. The township appeared to be very much hands-off in terms of interest in the preservation of the property. While we had a desire to rehabilitate it, there was no information or support from Heritage Committee or township. And we had to research on our own through Wellington County Archives and other sources to find out what the building might have looked like originally. Since 1975, the Heritage Act of Ontario has given municipalities and townships like Westlands the means to designate and protect older properties from demolition and neglect. Had it acted earlier, the township may have been able to prevent some losses. Luckily, we still have many of these sites left. In the case of our property, Further development or redevelopment isn't feasible due to the rural location, a lack of infrastructure such as sewer, water, and natural gas. We don't even have a modern phone line or internet service from Bell available on our street. To my understanding, these are things that are under the township's control. As long as those services remain absent, there's an inherent level of protection on the property. Our property is also heavily protected by the Grand River Conservation Area. There's only a small spot where we're actually allowed to have buildings on it. Just basically our property and just a little, or our house and just a little bit beyond the back of the house. Most of the property is in flood zone. So we're requesting for our property to be removed from the intended designation list. We understand the purpose of the program and we agree in many cases designation is needed to protect certain properties. However, designation is not a one size fits all solution. In our case, our house is in no danger of demolition or development. When we bought it, not only did we choose to keep the building and turn it into a home, but we repaired much of the damage that was caused by the Girl Guides. We've proven to be exactly the kind of property owners that you want living in a heritage property. A designation in our particular case would actually be counterproductive. What designation will do is cause us extra financial burden through increased insurance rates and the risk of decreased property value. Finding insurance coverage for our home has been an ongoing challenge. We've already aged out of our first provider services, and our current provider has just served us notice that our rates are going to increase by 17% starting next month. If the designation goes through, this will add reason for underwriters to boost our rates further or even deny us coverage. On top of the added expense, which is a very real problem, our property value will decrease, not increase in the eyes of bank appraisers attempting to put a value on the property for the ability to borrow against our home. A home that we've worked really hard to build up. Sorry, I'm already losing my spot. We worked really hard to build up the equity, and this is our single largest asset, and this would have a negative impact on our ability to keep up with the extra cost associated with a building like this. It will be 140 years old next year. One of the responses from the township regarding our concerns over the impact to our financial security is that we would be eligible for grants and other assistance programs. As of our meeting with township staff on August 9th, there were not yet any programs in place. So as it currently stands, voting to designate our home wouldn't reduce the risk of demolition at all, but it will negatively impact us as the owners. We're the type of owners who didn't need the township to invoke its right to apply the designation to prevent us from demolishing the building. And we didn't need any outside encouragement to save and restore it. We're asking to be removed from consideration. If you don't, you'd be leaving us to deal with the full financial fallout of an unnecessary designation. I'd like to reiterate that our house is in no danger of demolition or development. We have nearly 15 years of hard work and hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in our home. We were in minority when we bought it and we chose to restore it. And there was a lot of sacrifices that needed to be made. We chose not to build up. We chose to stick with the original structure. What looks like might be a 1,500 square foot home loses 300 square feet to the thickness of the walls. Such a small home with a high investment commits us to this property. We know we will never get out of it what we put into it. And we know we're in a minority of people who would put real work and real money towards a small building like this. This means the market for resale for us is very small. This is also what a bank appraiser will see when they attempt to appraise it. This is our forever home, and we remain dedicated to its preservation. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming in today. I know it's always challenging to come in and sit in front of council, and
Yes.
we try to remind people that we are just people as well.
I know.
Most of us have been on that side of the table as well, so we you have some empathy for it, and I want to give you a genuine thank you for preserving your home.
There's a lot of work.
Because as you indicated, many years ago, there was nothing in place and you could have bought the property and applied for a demolition and you saw value in it, and the community should thank you for that.
That was why we bought it, because we wanted to preserve it, because that's really important to me.
And that's
To
not what
preserve old
stops.
buildings.
So it's great that you took that initiative and invested in the structure, and so I just wanted you to know that we do appreciate that. Even if this seems like we're going against you, that's not our desire, so. I will open up to council because we're gonna deal with this report later. Sorry, I should know, but where in the agenda is it something we wanna move up so this individual doesn't have to hang around all day? What number is it?
It is a 9.3.2.
So we could probably jump through it if you, council, I'll leave that to council to decide.
I'll move that we move the report up for, discussion after the.
Go around first and then I'll come back to you. So, okay, council, go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I just wanted to say thanks for coming today, and I would echo the mayor's comments. Thank you for all of the hard work that you have put into preserving the heritage features of that home, and I can tell this is, you're very passionate about it, so I do appreciate that. I did just want to ask you about, you were talking about insurance, and so my understanding, and I could be incorrect, but my understanding was that insurance companies can increase premiums for older buildings for reasons such as outdated wiring or old heating systems. But I thought, I was under the impression that the designation itself does not place additional requirement on the insurer, and therefore the premiums. And that's something I read on the Province of Ontario website. So I don't know the ins and outs of that, but my understanding is that designation itself does not create increased insurance premiums. It could be the age of the home that does, but not necessarily the designation. So I just am curious what your conversations have been like with your insurance provider, because it would be good to know, if there's a disconnect there between what the province is saying and what the insurance companies are actually doing.
And I've done what research I can, and we've spoken with insurance companies, that we've dealt with. And no, it's not gonna say that, because there's a designation, there's gonna be a separate price for you. I do have a little bit, I did prepare for that question. So you get the underwriters that come out and assess, right? Underwriters and appraisers are risk averse, so they don't have to insure us if they don't want to. Now we have spoken directly with State Farm and Desjardins. And we're using a broker currently to help us find the best coverage that we can get. And he's only come back with one company who was willing to insure our home. Where it comes down to is that it's the stone. They would have to, if it's designated, they can't, if there's damage to the stone, they can't come in and replace it with modern materials and modern methods. So it becomes a bigger risk to them to insure us, and it's basically the stone that's holding us back. It's a rubble stone building. So it is a lot more expensive, and it's harder to find a skilled worker that can come in and do the job properly. So without the designation with insurance, they could just come in and fix it their own way and cover the cost of fixing it the way they want to fix it. With the designation, it has to be fixed according to the rules in the bylaw. That's where it changes. And right now, we're covering all those costs. We don't have to ask insurance to do that. When the repair needs to be done, we get the repair done and we make sure that it's done with the proper materials, that they're using the mortar that would have been used then with the lime and not the Portland cement that is used now. So we have had control of that to make sure that it gets done properly. That's all my question.
Yes, the designation has a clause in there that if there's a notice of objection received, the council of the township of Whistler shall consider the objection and make a decision whether or not to adopt a notice to intent to designate the property within 90 days after the end of the 30-day objection period. Assuming you are, you go ahead with the designation, would you plan to file a notice of objection?
I would have to go back and discuss it with my husband before I say yes for sure, but, I can imagine you would, yes.
Okay, I guess that's important for me, but whether or not to push to have your property removed from the list or wait until your objection is officially filed, because that is something that I would like to know beforehand if it's possible, because it is important. If we go now and I get voted out that your property cannot be removed from the list, or if you have a second back at it, but I would rather wait until you file official notice of objection.
Okay,
That's it. Okay.
Councilor Bailey?
Yeah, just a question for staff. Jamie's response about the insurance and repairing the stone wall. Is there, do we have a waiver process in place for repairing stone if it's not the correct stone? Can staff talk me through what the waiver process would be?
So through Mr. Chair, you're thinking if there was damage and a building permit needed to come in to repair it,
Yeah,
it would trigger our heritage permit process, and maybe our clerk can talk about what that would be.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, so if a permit was needed or damage took place to the building, there would be an opportunity for them to go through the heritage permit process to make a request of different materials being used, and that would be reviewed by the committee for comment and then council for decision.
it goes to the Heritage Committee first for comment and then comes to council. So it sounds like there is an opportunity if there was something, you know, to go wrong, that there isn't still a mechanism to be able to replace the stone there from what I've heard. Okay.
There is, it would, if I can just, add a little bit, there is the time to go through for that, though. It's a process, it's not something we could just address and have it fixed. We would have to go through that process, it would delay the repair.
And I guess just a comment is the risk we would have to take, whether we designate or not, is currently you are the owner of the property. We don't know that you're always going to be the owner of the property. Stuff comes up and we don't know who's going to come in and what they see value in the building. And so what this would do is protect the building. So do you agree, or do you think that it's important to be protecting the building for the future?
I do, and that's why we've done the work that we have. I'd like to remind everyone that the building was near ruin when we got it. All the wood on the inside had dry rotted. So we did that because we thought the building deserved to be protected. The problem is, if it becomes too expensive for us to stay there, or too expensive that we choose to continue to stay there, you don't know who else is going to come in after us, if their pockets are going to be deeper, and if they're going to want to make changes that we would never make. So I feel that the building would be better protected if you were to leave it so that we can stay there without all the additional costs, and that you're not pushing us out, so that we can stay there and we can continue to make our home. As I said, this is our forever home. Our children have been through moves and it has not been easy on them, and we made a promise to them that we would not move again, that this is the house that they are going to have. So as parents yourselves, I think you can understand the weight of that kind of promise that you make to a family. I do not break a promise to my family.
Councilors?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I would echo Councilor Bailey's comments. I think the fact that you invested in your home is very commendable, especially based on what you're explaining, the journey that you've been on from near ruin to a home. So I think that's important. I would say, obviously I chair the Heritage Committee, so this is something that we've toyed with for the last number of years, and very much the mindset that we had at Heritage Committee was to preserve heritage properties within the township. And we have seen some situations previous to this iteration of Heritage Committee where we have had some properties that are no longer present in the township. And that's truly unfortunate. I think especially as a rural township, we need to do these type of things. So I think that was very much the mindset when we went down this process. Yeah, I would, I would be sensitive to just, cost of living, insurance rate increases, which you noted, potential bank appraisers devaluing. I would say my experience with the banks, typically the heritage properties aren't devalued. But every bank may handle it in a different way. So I think that was one where I think our experiences have been counter to that. I'll leave it. Yeah, and I think that maybe the last point that I think, we do have some options within the bylaws to allow for alternative to heritage. If it's damaged for whatever reason, and I think the stonework's a good example. Some other ones that we've had are roof work or what have you, gable work, that if they can't be adequately replaced with specifically what the heritage feature was, that there are alternatives. I would say the turnaround timelines, and again, this is on township staff per se, but I think the turnaround in that process has been relatively quick. So as to not hold up a homeowner with, months and months of delays. So I'd say that's very much in my headspace. But I think I appreciate you delegating. This is never an easy thing to go through, and I can tell it's something that's very near and dear to your heart. I appreciate you sharing this with us.
If it makes a difference, I don't know, we did build the inside ourselves, so because of the condition of the inside, we weren't able to save the interior. But my husband built the house himself and with the help of both of our fathers. So to say that I think this house is important and needs to be saved, I bought it because of the heritage value and because we wanted to save it. And I want to keep it because it goes even beyond that. The importance it has to our family, I think, is beyond measure. So I definitely don't think that designation is what is going to save the house. The house was saved and it will continue to be saved as long as we're there, and our intention is to stay for a long time.
Well, and that's fair. And I guess from maybe what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm mishearing, the real reason you're not looking to have or wish it not to be designated would just be the cost increases for insurance and potential depreciated property value.
And those unknowns, as far as the depreciation, because as you said, in your experience, it hasn't, but then it's always up to that person who comes and does the evaluation. So we don't know what that person's stance will be, what the rules they will be that they're following. So there is that risk. And this program hasn't been like it's brand new for here. So we haven't had the chance to see that it works and that it is advantageous to homeowners. It's all just a promise right now and an expectation right now. But we have nothing to show us how it actually works and how people are actually affected and how long the turnaround times really are. That's still all an unknown.
It's very new in the process for the township, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's good.
I've been hesitating to ask you this question, but because you're hinging your objection on it, you stated that 17% increase to your premium. That's real money out of your pocket.
Yes.
But I'll use the analogy of taxes, residential taxes. If we were to propose a 17% increase to the township portion of your tax bill, that would equate to, $80 on the year, because we get so little of your tax bill, but the percentage looks high. So if you're willing to share that 17%, what that is in real money, that may help your case. The other thing is also, if I am in agreement with Counselor Hurst, that I don't feel your property will devalue. We have a wonderful community here. People want to live here. But if you were able to prove a devaluation, I feel you'd have a strong case to appeal your assessment to MPAC and get your taxes lowered, which would likely offset significantly your insurance now increase. Now, when we're talking about the repair of your stone, that conversation would only transpire in a catastrophic event. And I never want to see that happen to you or your family. Never. So the turnaround time, I think, would be quite adequate at the township if there had to be a deviation from the historical component of the stone on your house, because if we're having those conversations, you're likely not living there. If a tornado came through, or hurricane, something along those natures, right? So it's not that you need to do, because the repair maintenance you're doing on your own, and you're going to do that at your leisure, right? So I think that, as Councilor has pointed out, that there's a process there that something catastrophic happened. There isn't a stonemason in Ontario that does this particular style of stone mortar mix. You come to the committee, they're gonna find a solution for you in a proper timeline. So, but as Councilor Bailey mentioned, this is protection for when you're not there, right? And that's what is the concern, I feel, is that, you know, we recognize you and your family are going to do a great job. It's just if your situation changes and it gets sold for whatever reason, is there protection there to ensure that the next person coming in is going to, you know, treat the way you have? Because we see it. People are paying $1 million for a home, and they're not gonna down it. And then they're putting up a giant shack. Because there isn't land available, in Postage and rural, and there's a housing crisis and all those things that you probably know about, right? So it's unfortunate, you know, it's incredible to think you buy $1 million property and then you knock that instead. That's the reality of the situation. So really appreciate you coming. Really appreciate, again, the work you and your family have put into this structure. I don't know, I'm not sure if I'd want to see the photos of what it looked like when you bought it, because it sounds like it was, and TLC is probably not adequate. It needed more than TLC, but anyways, thank you again.
Something else. Can I ask a question of staff? If the building is, or if the property is not designated well, Jamie is the owner, is there anything you can put on title to say once this property is sold, we would like to go through the designation process? Is there a mechanism in place for that?
So through Mr. Chair, the Land Registry Office has become increasingly finicky, I guess is the word, on what can and cannot be registered on title. And so I would fairly confidently say no. And certainly it's not sort of an agreement like that between parties, really only has enforceability in civil law. It's not backed by legislation that would impact our CBO's ability to deny a building permit or a demolition permit.
We would also fall under the rules, the heritage rules now, where property can only be listed for 2 years, then it cannot be relisted for 5. So if you were within that
Right.
window and it sold, then we would probably be captured by that. You can't do it because it's in that window. It gets a little murky, so. Okay, so you have a resolution, receive the delegation. Oh, sorry, yeah, you're gonna move.
Follow-up question. You mentioned the fact it's 5 years relisting. 2 years, if you don't list it now, you have to open up the window 5 years. Can we not do that specifically for this property, or just not listed now, and 5 years from now, it's on our hit list to be evaluated?
So our municipal clerk could probably talk about the legislative timelines.
Through you, Mr. Chair, so yes, this property will be coming off the register in January 1st, 2025, and then it could not be relisted under section 27 for a period of 5 years. Following that 5 years, we could relist the property for 2 years, and then council would have another so it would have interim protection from demolition for 2 years. And at that point, council would have another opportunity to look at if it would like to designate. With that being said, council can choose to go through a designation of a property at any point in time. The property does not have to be listed under section 27 on the heritage register to be considered for designation.
So can you repeat that last part? In other words, if we withdraw the designation now, we can go back and ask for a designation anytime? Okay, and then if we go through the process and we say no, and then the 5-year kicks in?
No, so
Oh,
through you, Mr. Chair, so whether a property is listed or not listed, you can designate that property at any time. Having listed status provides you the interim protection from demolition. So this property will lose interim protection from demolition for a period of 5 years.
I see.
But at any point in that 5-year period, you could choose to go straight to designation, but there is no interim protection from demolition anymore.
Okay, so within that 5-year period of, let's say somebody wants to demolish that property, we can move on designated at a particular time?
So once a demolition, so because it doesn't have interim protection, a demolition permit can be submitted and the demolition permit can be executed, and council would not have an opportunity to designate the property at that point because it has lost the protection.
Okay,
You were gonna move a motion to move up the report.
yes, yes, I'd like to move a motion to move up to 9.32, following the delegation.
We're supposed to receive her delegation first.
It's all right.
How about we receive it and move the report up all in one resolution? No,
Let's do that.
we're gonna amend the resolution to receive the delegation plus move up report 9.2. With it, the original was 10.3. Sure.
All right, another question for you.
You know what? Are these better?
I can ask
With the
them the
report.
report. That's
Just don't
fine.
forget it. Write it down.
Yeah,
Let's-
it's a follow-up to this question. But I
Yeah,
won't-
let's get to the report.
So we have Councillor Sepulveda moving to receive the delegation for information and to advance agenda item 9.3.2 directly following the delegation.
Okay, moved, second, Councillor Bailey, all in favor? Carried. I'll just ask you to go back up to the gallery and then we'll do the report. Thank you.
Thank you.
And do you need to give a quick synopsis?
This is, I'm not sure if we have
Yes.
Laura coming to join us.
Yes. And we're not dealing with the other Watson Road property on this one. Her dad's, her parents.
I'm keeping that out and I have a separate.
We'll do it at the end. So for your information, we are not discussing property until her.
Yes, it is, and make sure I have this right, 4726 Watson Road South, number 19 on the list.
Yes,
Any of your comments cannot relate to that property.
I'll try my best.
All right,
Okay,
good.
go team.
Clear as mud?
Yeah.
All right. What?
Love it. Go ahead. Okay, so through you, Mr. Chair, the purpose of this report is to seek council's direction related to the intention to designate properties listed in the schedules to this report. And this is kind of done in accordance with the priority properties that were identified by council last December, as well as the 3 properties that council withdrew their notice of intention to designate in May of this year.
All right. Do you want to read that whole resolution?
So it's that report ADM 2024-047 entitled 2024 Priority Properties Intention to Designate be received. The council of the Township of Clifton stated its intention to designate the properties listed within the report, excluding property listed as number 19, 4726 Watson Road South. And state its intention to designate under section 29, part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And that staff be authorized to proceed with the notice requirements as outlined in section 29 of the act in accordance with the Township's Ontario Heritage Act alternative notice policy. And where no objections are received within the prescribed time period, that staff be directed to prepare and provide designation bylaws for council's consideration and enactment.
The resolution here doesn't have part 4 after section 29 in mind.
Okay, right here.
No.
Okay, on yours? Up,
Yeah, oh, I'm-
scroll up a little bit, I think.
Oh, there it is.
Yes.
It's the second one. Okay, sorry. I got the wrong part of it. Are you gonna move for that, Councillor Hurst? Councillor Spillis? Seconded, yeah. Go ahead, Councillor Buda.
Yeah, I first just want to say, again, I know I've said this before, but to the Heritage Committee and to the staff that have worked on this, tremendous amount of work has gone into providing all of these statement of cultural values and interests. So thank you for all that hard work. The question that I wanted to ask is in regard to the process. So if we go ahead with our intent to designate this list as it is. And there's an objection, and then council decides not to follow through with the designation of a property based on that objection. Understanding that it could be delisted and have no interim protection, is there a defined amount of time that has to pass before it can then be put back on the table for consideration for designation? Meaning, even if we don't do it this year, we could still do it next year and the following year and the following, we could continue to repeat that process over and over indefinitely. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, there's no minimum time period that council would have to wait to consider designation of that property again. You could take it off at one meeting and then the very next meeting, restate your intention to designate.
Okay, so by stating our intention to designate today, it does not mean that we can't, in 90 days or whatever, decide that we're not gonna proceed. And making that decision does not mean that we can't reconsider that decision immediately after that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, so if council states their intention to designate today, there will be a 30-day objection period once staff send the notice. So staff are intending to send the notice on October 17th. The final day to object will be November 16th. Staff will then bring a report for council's consideration to either withdraw the intention to designate at that point, or as we did previously, we could conduct further engagement with those property owners, and then the final day to make a decision with respect to the designation would be February 14th of 2025. And should council choose not to pass a designation bylaw at that point, those properties will lose the interim protection, but council could, again, in 2025, restart that process just with the understanding that there is no interim protection from demolition.
Okay, that's just helpful in understanding what we can and can't, what the situation is moving. I have no other question.
Yes, I would like to have a clause added to the recommendation. It's noted in the actual notice of designation, but I think it should be spelled out in the actual recommendations. My suggestion is, where objections are received within the prescribed time period, that staff shall prepare a report for council's consideration of whether or not to withdraw the notice of intention to designate the property within 90 days after the end of the 30-day objection period. This is verbatim stated in the actual designated notices, but not stated in the recommendation. I think that it's important to bring that forward so that everybody knows and understands that it's not this is it type of thing, and then you have to follow through the actual designation, read the entire designation and come to the last paragraph, okay. So I'd like to suggest that that be done. I'm not gonna move today that we take the property in question out of the list because there may be other people who object at that time. So rather than approaching a piecemeal, I'd rather just do it all at once. So I would support the recommendation with the addition of that one paragraph. Do
you have any comments on?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I've added that sort of last provision to this resolution and then the second resolution with the one property that we on that.
I like it because it ensures that we see an objection and then we make a determination on those specific properties.
Stated in the designation,
Yeah.
and just bring out to the front so it's not hidden there, so it's delivered. I know staff have done a lot of work on this and there's no dispersion on staff. I just want the public to know that it's there as well.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah, no questions. Justine, thank you for the clarification. I now got my little list of arrows on how this process goes. And so I think I'm in agreement today, like maybe seeing if there were any other properties that are going to have an objection and then waiting whenever our next meeting is November meeting, we'll have that information.
Through you, Mr. Chair, staff will be targeting to bring the next iteration back at the November 27th meeting.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Councilors?
I'm supportive. I think Councillor Spoulos made some good additions to that. I think for our previous delegation, Jamie, I think there's a very clear, if you choose to go through a formal objection, you know, there's timelines here and you have every opportunity to do that, and that'll get brought to council for a formal decision. But I think for today, we move forward with the report with the noted amendments, and if there are formal objections submitted, then we deal with them as they come.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the proper direction to go. I don't feel this is where you were going with your question line, but I was worried that it will give the impression that we'll continue to designate to keep it protected, you know, but not be fully designated, and I don't know.
No, I just
okay.
I'm just wanting to understand that. I think there was some confusion initially that once something comes off the registry, we can't look at it again for 5 more years, and that's not necessarily what, we lose the interim protection
We
for
lose the
5
interim
years.
protection.
But it's not that we can't
Look at it.
look at it for 5 years. I was just trying to get some clarity.
No, and that helps me too. I mean, but as the clerk stated, somebody could walk in and apply for a demolition and it's gone.
Yes.
So I think, no, I know, we need to make a decision on all of these properties. And having it out there being discussed and contemplated endlessly is not great for staff time, so. I like the addition, get a formal complaint, we'll deal with them, and then, we bring some fruition to the process for all of the property owners, in or out, so. I'm supportive of keeping it as is, and then we're gonna second it,
We
right?
do, yes.
So all in favor of that? That's carried. And you have a resolution for the last property?
Yes, so if the council of the township of Whistler state its intention to designate the following properties pursuant to section 29, part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Property 4726 Watson Road South, and that staff be authorized to proceed with the notice requirements as outlined in section 29 of the act in accordance with the township's Ontario Heritage Act alternative notice policy. And where no objections are received within the prescribed time period, that staff be directed to prepare and provide designation bylaws for council's consideration and enactment. And where objections are received within the prescribed time period, that staff shall prepare a report for council's consideration, whether or not to withdraw the notice of intention to designate the property within 90 days after the end of the 30-day objection period.
Your mover, Councilor Hurst, Councilor Bailey. Thoughts on this one? All in favor of that property? Oh, don't you dare
Sorry, I'm
get that
just.
hand down. You did not participate.
No, I was just scratching.
Okay. We have the written delegation to go back to, I believe. Thanks, Laura. Appreciate it.
No problem. Good to see you.
We are on the written delegation.
Do you want it first or just get it done with the delegation?
I don't care. No, we can sing some of the proper order, right?
I think we're back to, yeah.
You just kind of found that page one.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for him to tell me.
We're not doing 46, which is the other here.
Consents,
Okay.
you wanna read it?
Yes. That the consent agenda items listed for the October 9th, 2024 council meeting be received for information.
Okay, move for that, please. Let's see if I can- Councilor Willis, Councilor Bailey. All right, any items to be withdrawn for consents? I was looking for page 1 and the consents are on page 3. I didn't even need to find page 1. Sorry, any items to be pulled out of the consents today?
6.12.
6.12. Councilor Spoulos, anything?
No,
Put that in the minutes.
time ever.
Oh, see, if you were speaking first, you would have had one. Okay, we're gonna receive all of them except 6.1.2. All in favor? It's carried. All right, Councilor Crowder, you're up.
Thank you, and I'm trying to find my notes. Okay, so this is the consent item in regards to, grant funding that is in support of the work and research for feasibility study for the Royal City Science Center. which we all know has expressed interest in locating in Pusland. And I just wanted to pull this out, just to bring it, first just to bring attention to the project, but also, in that consent link, there's an opportunity for public to leave, comments and photos and share the project on Facebook. There's no really direction I wanted to bring out of it. I just wanted to highlight that for our community to go look at that and to give them the opportunity to have some engagement and provide some feedback on that through the link that was provided.
So we'll just receive that. Go.
Yeah, my comment is, I think there should be a groundswell of citizens residents to go after U of G and support this project, because right now I understand it's not very being supported by U of G. And I think that should be made evident somehow in a minutes type of thing, that or make somewhere residents aware that this is going to fail unless there's
Support from University Goal.
yeah.
Much as I'd love to shame them. We had a tour of an aggregate facility with a new aquaculture pens in it, and there were University of Guelph representation there, even though we've been trying to get a meeting with University of Guelph for a year. However, that being said, I was passed a business card and I then passed on to you, Ms. White Fox. Could you reach out to those individuals and just try to get that meeting, and we can discuss this project again as well? I think that's probably
That's fine.
but I agree with your statements. I just want to be a little cognizant of which coming down. It is very disappointing. We have serious support from the UG on this project. But we'll start with that meeting. I can get them.
Has the project pushed out any social media stuff themselves? That can start a buzz, that can get kind of conversation going within the team?
Well, that website is basically it type of thing. It's got a lot of all the drawings and the perspectives of the plan specifically on that property. So
Yeah, I don't know if it's appropriate for the township to be sharing that, though. I don't know how the public can
I think it is appropriate. Getting the meeting,
get the meeting.
get the meeting,
Hold
express our desire for the U of G to support this again. I don't know, can we speak to I believe they're included in the agenda at some point, but we had some correspondence from the U of G that stated they essentially would not make a decision until they knew the future use of the property, correct?
Yes, that's, through Mr. Chair, yes, the university has sort of, not made a decision on this and hasn't really given, I think, the Rural City Science Group enough feedback to know which direction to go, so. And on that, in terms of sharing it, I think there could be a place on the township's website under our economic development to maybe have this included as a proposal, just to sort of share it and maybe have some of our residents learn more about what this proposal looks like. So staff can take that away and see where the best spot is.
But
well, that's, I think that's a question. we can
Yeah.
just find out.
Yeah.
we'll still try to get those meetings. Councilor, do you have anything?
No, just supportive of the Royal City Sciences path forward, and I think as a municipality, we need to do what is within our lane to support their endeavor. I think like long-term, this is, if it ever happen, it would be generational, so.
I think it's important what you just stated, that, we do what we're able to, or that's within our lane, because this project is it's a massive undertaking, and the township doesn't have the ability to support them financially in the millions of dollars to get a project here, but we do have things within our means, and we'll try to assist them, but they have to. I think we may need to be clear to them that this gets some momentum on what we can and can't do, so that they don't have unrealistic expectations, but anyways. Working? All right. We
We just need a seconder.
a seconder for that. Is he the mover too?
Boyd. Sorry. Name. I thought I had it on.
Yeah, right back.
Sorry.
All right, all in favor? Carried. All right. Where's that written one? Written down.
Get it.
There is 7.2.2, no. Yes, 7.2.2, correct? Is that where we're at?
Yes.
Yes, 7.2.2. You just want to read the resolution?
Yes.
Oh, no, okay.
All right, so it's to receive it for information.
Can you move for that, please? I suppose, Councilor Hurst. Shall we have, should we provide a response to this group? Or just receive the information?
So through you, Mr. Chair, perhaps as part of the discussion, staff could weigh in on what our eligibility criteria looks like in our user fees and charges bylaw for this sort of a request. That might help council in determining next steps.
Sure.
And our deputy clerk, Peter, will be able to help us with that.
Yes, as per our user fees and charges bylaw, this type of group would not be eligible to receive any type of reduced rate for facility rentals.
And just for council's indulgence and any of the watching public, what is the rental rate for the room that they're inquiring about?
If they were looking to rent the Alf Hills room, it's approximately $40 an hour. If they were looking to have more people in attendance and would want the Archie McRobbie Hall, it's approximately $70 an hour.
And generally speaking, we have user fees for our facilities, whether it's tennis courts, or the hall. What's the driving principle behind having some user fees that maybe if we're going to do a response to this community group, just maybe some clarity on why we charge for a specific group of people to use a specific room? Does that make sense?
So through Mr. Chair, in general, municipal facilities are at a discounted rate compared to more private facilities, and it's subsidized by the tax base. And that's to make sure that there's access to these types of publicly funded facilities. So there is a rate that's charged, and it's supposed to offset some of the operating costs associated with running the building, but by no means does the cost cover the full expense. And so what council has done is set up reduced rates for groups that qualify, and there are parameters around what that looks like. So we have our regular reduced rate, and then we have our seniors reduced rate. And again, that's put in place to sort of encourage programming and encourage these community groups that offer services to the greater community. And that's sort of the methodology behind the reduced rates in general. And so having that eligibility criteria really helps staff in order to determine who qualifies and who doesn't, so that we are consistent in how we apply it, and it's a fair process.
But even the non-reduced rate is not full cost recovery. It's still, a subsidy from the general taxpayer. So even though it's a slight fee, you are receiving some sort of service or from the township, because if you were to go rent a private hall somewhere else, it would be a significant more cost. So I would ask council to entertain just sending a response to this group, not computer. This is not to take away from your position, but just our user fee charges bylaw does not permit this. Just, a little bit of insight into how it is still subsidized by the taxpayer at a reduced rate of, $34 per hour. And, that's the township's policy, is that we do offer these to rent for X purpose. And a little bit of clarity, I think, would go a long way, but.
Just a question of our CEO, with respect to ratepayers, what is the policy with respect to ratepayers?
So as I understand it, and Ms. Peter can clarify, our ratepayers do not qualify, ratepayer groups do not qualify for the reduced rates.
Thank you.
So, Shall we provide a written response to this group? Sir,
Yeah, I actually just have one question that, it's just occurring to me now. Do we still have a reduced, I can't remember if it's a reduced rate or an added rate for residents versus non-resident? If residents get less of a rate than if you were a non-resident to rent the facility, is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
So that $40 you're speaking of is the resident rate? Okay.
I don't know whether to bring this up. In discussions with some members of the group and some staff and while all this has been going on, I do know that OPP actually run a program. It's called Safeguard Ontario Property Security Program. They offer this program to the public. It's to help safeguard your house against, theft and break-ins and things, and it's very appropriate to what this is about. So I just wondered if council or staff had any comments. Council wanted to support maybe the township hosting in our own facilities, OPP to come and put on this presentation. And then we can invite this group to come. We can invite other members of the community. Anyone can come. And it's an educational, how to safeguard your home against theft. So we're responding to something that's happening in the community. We're using our own facilities. They're not having to pay for it. And it's for the well-being of the community. So I'm looking for thoughts on that.
so is the ask that we just approach that group and suggest they host something here? Like, how much are you asking staff to organize this?
Well, OPP is already involved in it, so I would almost want to reach out to OPP and say, would you like to come host your program within the community? And I feel, so whether that's staff reaching out to OPP, I don't mind reaching out through my contacts, but it's not, just as an aside, this is not a Safe Communities mandate. Safe Communities is about preventing people from going to the hospital. So just so we're all clear, Safe Communities is not about crime prevention, but I do have my connections with OPP and I don't mind reaching out saying, hey, would you consider coming and doing something on behalf? They're already engaged with this community. They may have come and already done this to the small group that met already. But I thought that way we're kind of getting around. There's education is going to go out to the public. It's coming through OPP, which provide this program already. And then maybe the community is a little more protected.
It'd be great to ask them to come host us a training session here. Then staff, do you have the ability to waive the fee for that since it's serving the whole community, or?
So through you, Mr. Chair, when it is a township event like that we're sort of facilitating, the fee doesn't apply.
Yeah, so that'd be great.
I like that. I think it's a pre-existing program out there that we're bringing to this community. It's part of a larger piece, but it may satisfy some of the issues that the groups presented.
I think it'd be beneficial for the rest of the community because the break-in is not confined to that particular area.
Exactly.
A lot of us are contact residents that had break-ins.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. And I know, this did come through rec committee, but it's like, seeing the Safe Communities is not really in the mandate of the rec committee. But I know the members of the rec committee said, hey, if I knew this was happening, this meeting with the police, I would have liked to have attended as well. So I think there probably is an uptake. There would be an uptake if it was offered to the community as a whole.
So in the response, I think we should include that in the response, saying that council's giving direction to staff to invite that group down to host a community event. And if you, I don't want the response to be too delayed, but if we can have the date in there, but I wouldn't want to delay the response to wait for another date because I don't want these residents thinking we ignored them, so.
Just one other comment. I learned in my little research around rentals in the community, but the library has a room that they rent out. It holds 50 people and they charge $16 an hour. if anyone is looking for
Yeah,
a space,
it's an option for them.
pretty cheap.
Yeah, it is. Okay. Councilor Harrison? You have a call, Councilor?
Yes, I have it captured, and we have, Councilor Spools and Councilor Hurst so far moving in second.
Any last comments before we proceed? All in favor? It's carried. All right. We get into now. Yeah, let's do it. Let's break.
There was an error in the minutes. Can you change that
Oh, yes. Yes.
without us having to?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, it says Counselor Seeley.
Oh, boy. Okay, we'll get that.
Caught my eye that was, no, it's correct.
Getting demoted.
Okay, so, everyone online, we're going to break for half an hour for lunch.
That's the vote before.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Our next item on the agenda is item 8.1, public meeting. October 9th, 2024 at 7 p.m. Public information meeting held in person at the municipal office, 7404 Wellington Road 34. And by electronic participation through Zoom regarding proposed 2025 user fees and charges. That will be chaired by Councillor Goyda. So make sure you attend. Next, I believe we're on to item 9.3. I'll have it ready here. And that is presented by Justine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek council's direction regarding establishing a Heritage Financial Incentive Program. So contained in this report are comments from the Heritage Advisory Committee regarding the options for the Heritage Financial Incentive Program, and staff are recommending that option 2, which is the Heritage Grant Program, be selected as it would allow the most flexibility and can be tailored to suit the township's needs. Myself, the CEO and Director of Finance are happy to answer any question.
Great. Can I have you read the resolution?
Yes, so the recommendation,
Recommendation.
that report ADM 2024-046 entitled Heritage Financial Incentive Program be received, and the council direct staff to proceed with option 2 as outlined in the report, and that council direct staff to draft a Heritage Financial Incentive Program policy for council's consideration and approval to be included in the 2025 corporate work plan.
All right, you're gonna move it for that, Councillor Hurst. You're gonna move everything that has to do with heritage.
Yeah,
You
right.
recognize that, right? Councillor Bailey? All right, questions or comments? Councillor Gruden?
And I don't really have any questions. I'm in agreement. I think, option 2 looks like it has a lot of flexibility and the least amount of administration, so it's a good report that I'm going to.
Supposed to.
Echo Councilor Goyda's comments.
Really?
Yeah, I just had a question. I'm wondering if staff has any suggestions on when the program would be implemented? Because we currently have some designated properties and some not.
So with you, Mr. Chair, just in some initial conversation, it was suggested that perhaps the incentive program start receiving applications in 2027. Once sort of our designation program is at a good spot where we hit our targeted amount of properties, that would be most fair, so that perhaps you were a property that was designated in 2026. You know, there's a program that started and some grants have been issued in 2025 already. Maybe it would just be most fair to sort of build up that reserve and then have applications start beginning of January or 2027.
I think that's a great suggestion, and it also gives us time to maybe build up the pot a little bit
Yep.
for that time. Just one, and then I guess just wondering how then property owners would be notified of the program. So
So through you, Mr. Chair, I think it's, staff can bring back, some options when we report in 2025. But it would, I think it's important to notify these folks that this opportunity is coming. Perhaps they do have some, renovations planned and they might want to just wait until this program is up and running.
great. Okay, thanks for that. I think option 2 is great.
Councillor Hurst?
Yeah, maybe two quick comments. So I think, I'm really glad that this is moving forward. I think, you know, with the work that the Heritage Committee is doing with the designation properties, I think this shows a good sign to incentivize, investments in those properties and everything that goes along with that. I guess my preference would be sooner than 2027, but I get that the wheels of developing and designing these type of programs take time. So I'll leave that to staff, not to, I would love it if it was rolled out tomorrow, but that's not realistic either, right? So, yeah, so that was my one comment, is just some timelines. I think it's really important to communicate this to the heritage properties so that they're aware of this. And the second would be, just some description around what it entails, what it doesn't entail, I think is really important. So I think if I kind of looked at our delegation earlier today, the discussion was around walls, right? So if the walls are a designated feature, then in theory, these funding programs would be in support of that. But say somebody wants to put in a window in a heritage property that's not a heritage feature, I think we need to be really clear what this fund entails and what it doesn't entail. And again, I feel like I'm getting in the weeds and I don't want to go there because that's not a role as a counselor, but I think that's where my head goes, is like, I'm super jazzed up about this. Let's promote it. But yeah, sooner than later would be my perspective. But again, understanding it takes time. Well done.
And I think with the 27 rollout date is the concern is you don't want to create the haves and the have-nots. We're trying to get everybody in, and then, then everybody would have an equal opportunity. So I support that as well. If we can get it in sooner, that's great. But if aiming for 27 as maybe like, that's the latest it shall be implemented, is fine too. But I mean, we keep adding stuff to your guys' plate, so okay. All right, all in favor? That's carried. Do that one. All right, 9.3.3. We have the seniors committee. Oh, she's on it. Just wait for Laura to come back. Welcome back.
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Chair, the purpose of this report is off the back of the direction council gave last September in order to gauge interest in having a seniors advisory committee during the next term of council. And we kind of launched a survey throughout the spring, and the results are included in the report, and staff have outlined a number of different options for council to consider.
You want to read the recommendation?
Yeah. Great. So the report ADM 2024-048 Seniors Advisory Committee Engagement and Interest Report be received. And that council select one of the options and give staff direction to draft a terms of reference for a senior advisory committee for council's consideration and approval as part of the 2025 corporate work plan.
You're gonna move her for that. The senior.
Yeah.
Just close.
That's discrimination.
It isn't when you are, is it? No, maybe it is. Council, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, that's right. Am I seconding it?
Yeah, you both. You did both.
Okay, so I've been thinking about this a little bit, and I worry a little bit about splitting the sort of the youth committee and a seniors committee into sort of 2-year terms, that those committees will just sort of get momentum going and then it stops and kind of nothing happens for 2 years until it starts again. But right now, and where like through the rec committee, we're actually kind of already working on some projects that are sort of directly aimed at supporting seniors. Like the groups and the initiatives, and trying to advocate to bring some new programs in for seniors. And at the same time, at the rec committee, there have been some sort of like ideas and discussions that have been coming up at rec committee that don't necessarily fit within the current goals and objectives of the rec committee. So I was thinking, as maybe an alternative solution, that maybe there's some opportunity for the rec committee to evolve a little bit, to be more along the lines of like an active and well-being committee that would that could include both seniors and recreation. But also introduce things like, I don't know, like card nights or cooking classes or those kinds of things that are maybe more not specific to recreation, but well-being, but could apply to seniors and others in the community as well. And I don't know if maybe it's something instead of being a committee of 4 members, it's 6 members or 8 members or whatever. And then within that committee, there's senior subcommittee and a recreation subcommittee and a everything else subcommittee. But I think the two things, recreation and seniors, have a lot of kind of overlap happening already. So I feel that it's something that we could maybe look at incorporating without the need to add more staff time or resources. But of course, it would mean like evolving the terms of reference of the rec committee. But again, since we're not looking at doing this until the next term of council, there's some time to do that. And I guess like as it applies to this report, that would be more along the lines of what we have as option 3. I don't know if staff maybe have concerns with that. It's just an alternate way of wanted to bring it.
This one. No space?
I pose a variety of options and answers. The biggest thing is the concern about extra staffing required, citing something like 517 extra hours. But I'd like to explore the one option that I suggested was that I do agree with, by the way, with Councillor Goyda's comment that we shouldn't be cutting the youth committee for 2 years and then somebody else. I think we should be ongoing process for all committees. My thought process is right now the youth committee meets every 10 months of the year. Perhaps what we could do is have them meet 5 months of the year and the seniors meet the other half. Now, there's a concern in there that the extra staff are required on that, but I see that's only same number of committee meetings. Granted, there's going to be a roll-up time to get the seniors committee established, but at least the number of meetings that staff have to attend stays the same. The other point is seniors, they would want to probably meet during the daytime. They would want to be past their bedtime at night. So.
Was that like 6 p.m.?
9 o'clock's the new midnight.
It is for me too. Yeah.
So yeah, 6 p.m.
So I would like to explore keeping the number of meetings the same, but at least leaving Council Bailey's committee, that she's done a good job. I ask her to give up 5 of those meeting dates for the seniors committee.
That's really.
Thank you. Well, Councillor Goyda pretty much took all the words out of my mouth. I had thought that perhaps option to create a new committee, a wellness active committee, sort of with an umbrella integrating senior programming, recreational programming, wellness, maybe mental health focus. There's a lot of data out there right now that talks about the need for, mental health supports and things like that. And I think social programming is really, helpful for that kind of thing. So the direction I was going was kind of modifying what the rec committee is doing now, integrating some of this senior input, and then creating kind of a wellness active committee instead. And that way we're not tapping in or adding any more staff resources. We're just kind of staying with the resources we have, but kind of changing direction a little bit. That's where my head was going.
Councillor Hurst?
Yeah, you guys totally changed my headspace through this. Yeah, the hell with my notes. Yeah, I think I agree with not taking away from the youth committee just to develop a seniors committee. I think the idea of 5 meetings a year for each of the potential groups as opposed to 10, I think maybe is a really good landing point where you have meetings every 2 months type of thing as opposed to every month. Yeah, I know, I don't disagree with any of the comments shared here. I think it'd be really important for a robust term of reference for the committee so that you have a very clear understanding of the participants, what they're there to provide discussion points on and direction on, because it can get unwieldy if it's not done tight. So I'll leave my comments there.
So I generally like the discussion, but by taking the seniors committee and just putting it on the rec committee doesn't alleviate the work. There's gonna be new topics, new concerns, so we're not saving work as I think CEO has mentioned as a concern, like we're just putting it under a different umbrella. What I feel we should do is because most 53% of the respondents or of the seniors said they'd be wanting a committee for the next term of council. So what I'm hearing, more than half are happy to have this in place for the next term. So I think the CAO should take away, come back with a report for the 26 budget cycle, no, 27 budget cycle, which will be the fall of 26, because that's an election year. This is kind of saddling the next iteration of council with a decision to make that has financial implications, but it fits what some of the seniors are saying. Tally how much overtime staff are working to deal with the committees that we have now. And come to council with a proposal, possibly for a new FTE, because that incorporates a whole new committee. So we may end up needing to fund a quarter of an FTE because we'll have the savings in overtime, and there was a third component, there was overtime. Maybe it's just additional, anyways, municipality with all the challenges we're facing around other things, I'm sure the CEO can justify the last remaining portion that isn't covered by the overtime. And I think that budget, those monies would be doable for us. I have real concerns about knocking the youth committee down 10 to 5 meetings, because we just got them started and then we go say to them, oh, by the way, now we don't want you meeting that 10 times a year. We want you meeting 5 times a year. Does that devalue in their minds what we see as their input? So I think there could be justification made in the 26 budget to justify maybe an FTE, maybe it's a half, I don't know, something along those lines, so that we don't have to mess with these other committees. It's kind of where I'm falling. We have some time.
Just a question. In the questionnaire, what was the alternative response to setting up a committee in the next term of council? Was it a yes, no, or was it a leading question? That's kind of my.
Amazing question. I'm going to pull up the survey. So when we asked, would you like to be a part of the seniors advisory committee during the next term of council? It was yes or no,
Okay.
were the two options.
So it is leading.
Okay, so it's a leading question. So some could have said, yes, I want to start now. Because I have a woman calling me, saying,
Right.
when can I start? When can I start? So I do know there's interest in before. but-
And through Mr. Chair, there was a few at the end, there was like just a general comment section, and there was that comment a couple times saying like sooner versus later.
Well, okay, I'd like to hear, Courtney, like, my concern is if we just rename the rec committee and dump all the senior, it's an affectionate term, but move any work that would be done in the seniors committee just under the umbrella of a rec committee, call it a wellness committee. Or I would assume you'd have the same concerns about staffing, hours and things of that nature, because the work generated by that.
So through Mr. Chair, whenever, like these are great initiatives and we get great feedback out of all of these types of things that we do, but they do make work. Just like with youth, it's a great initiative, but of course they have their ideas that they want to bring to life, and that's what we want from them, but we have to make sure that we have the staff resources to be able to support what is essentially a new level of service for the township. And so where I think my concern is with adding the seniors committee without, even if it's a component of an existing committee, they're going to have initiatives, they're gonna have goals, they're gonna have things that they want to do and accomplish, which is why we would put it in place in the first place. And where I'm concerned because what we've seen a little bit with our committees really ramping up, I think they're more active than they've ever been in the township. We see some areas like communications, like economic development that sort of gets shrunken. We don't have the capacity to spend our time on those initiatives. So you'll see in sort of the answers that staff provided, committees has dominated sort of Laura's role, where she really is supposed to be focusing equally on communications. And then, of course, with our new initiatives around economic development and how important those are to the township. I just wouldn't want to see that role now become fully committee based, and then these sort of other really important things that we're doing get backburnered. Because essentially when we add them, what we'll see on the corporate work plan is items getting deferred, items getting moved to, future years and things like that, because we just don't have the capacity. So, to Mayor Skilly's point, if we bring on the seniors, sort of component in rec, we're likely to see goals and objectives that they want to have accomplished. Likewise, even if we split and do 5 and 5 meetings, you're still gonna have that seniors committee wanting these initiatives brought forward. So the meeting time is really not as significant as the workload that staff are going to have to support the committees. And again, even looking at, like the daytime, so then that shifts sort of out of, let's say we have daytime meetings and they're gonna take up 50 hours a year. That's 50 hours of work in the daytime that's going to be shifted after hours for that staff person. So there's sort of the domino effect with this any way we look at it. So I think it's really important to, whether we sort of put a perimeter around what our committees can do every year in terms of their goals and objectives. Maybe they can have one and that's it. And then we can look at, expanding how many committees we have. There's options in that way that we could look at, sort of just getting a bit of a handle on the workload. And maybe they get 4 objectives over the course of the term, and that's where they have to sort of prioritize. So we can bring a report back to look at that, particularly if we're not looking at bringing it in until 2026. But that is something of a concern for staff right now, just the open capacity to take this on.
So the committee support, I know Laura's doing it, and I don't mean this in any offense, but if that were a standalone position, is that a relatively junior position in the corporation, or is that like clerk has to do that kind of thing?
No, so Laura's role as our committee coordinator is not an entry-level role. So Laura is doing a great job managing that. It's a lot of people to manage, right? So
What I was trying to do is figure out if we could have a more junior role, because it would have less impact on the budget, say for 26. So whether Laura provides like guidance to a junior person, not trying to get into your details, but I'm trying to figure out a way we can justify this with less budget impact. Because if we can reduce overtime, and then have a junior role, and then provide support to these committees, and then you can get back to focusing on probably what you took the job for.
We're good.
You know what I mean? Like, there could be a lot of benefits to see, like, looking at that whole equation versus just seniors. So I'd like to see that.
So staff can certainly report back. We don't have to make any decisions today. We can take a look.
So, kind of heard my pitch, I know. We'll go back.
Yeah, I guess I just want to sort of clarify though, that I think that I hear the concern about adding more work, but I guess I want to push back a little bit and say that I'm not necessarily suggesting that by amalgamating like a seniors and active committee that we're introducing more projects. They're just different projects. And I think like the rec committee right now has 2 projects on the go, I believe, geared specifically to seniors already. We're already doing that work. So it's not to say that we're gonna all of a sudden introduce on top of what we're doing now, 15 new projects. It's just the projects will have a different focus. That's my mindset. And I also think that, like, I can speak to the rec committee. We have subcommittees that maybe I need to be doing a better job, but can be more accountable to do a lot of the work without the staff member leading and guiding. Like, that's what the subcommittee should be, is doing that work on their own time and bringing it back to the committee to consider as a whole. So I just don't want to I don't want to throw the idea away. Like, I would like to explore it a little bit more, I guess. But I don't disagree with what you're saying.
So are you asking the CAO to report back on kind of 2 different fronts? One being that what you're suggesting, that it does become part of the rec committee and what those impacts could or could not be, or
Yeah,
how it would have to operate, like what
I think it would be valuable to
that makes sense.
get a better understanding.
Yeah, I guess I didn't get a firm feeling whether or not the 5 and 5 split would work. I don't know what Councilor Bailey thinks.
Yeah, I
Can
don't
I
know
ask,
what I
can I
think
ask
of
a
that.
clarification question? For the youth committee, are they linked to the terms of council, or are they in until they're out, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, they're linked to the term of council, like 22 to 26.
Right, so, then I would say, for me, it would be easier to accept a change with the new term, because then those people would be signing up for the 5 versus 10 meetings. I really worry about, well, we're not gonna, anyways, that's just gonna.
I also appreciate that seniors want to get some action right away, and Councilor Goyda's got a sort of interim plan. Perhaps she just continues what she's doing on behalf of the seniors within the rec committee. And at least that's something happening until we formalize the seniors committee in the next term of council. And my suggestion is, for the 25 budget, we earmark half a person in the budget. And then when it comes to the 26 budget, we earmark the other half, and then we hire the person. In other words, it's not one big hit. In 26, it's sort of incremental.
Albert, but we need to hear her report back on,
Yeah, well,
it might not be a full person, it might be.
Yeah, I'm suggesting that's an option to consider, where you budget something and you save up the first, and then it's not a big hit type of thing. It's not a 1% hit, it's maybe 0.5% hit each year.
That makes sense. So for the 25 budget discussion, have a percentage of a FTE in, it'll be one of those ones that we, staff will require direction on, and like, it's one of those easy ones to cut, let's be honest, but yeah, I think that's a great starting point. And then you'll still work on, what the impacts, the overtime budget could be, might find some savings. 5 versus 10.
Yeah, I mean, what I was gonna say is back up. I would prefer reducing versus not having a committee for 2 years.
No,
So that's
I've been fully supportive.
Yeah,
of it.
it's too hard to get momentum going and then to stop it and then to try to get that going again.
I agree.
5 could work. With the group we have right now. I mean, they're busy kids too, so we don't always have everyone at all the meetings. But again, I don't know how that would work with momentum with these guys. Feel like we need to keep rolling, to keep it fresh in their minds, to keep it going. That's just my 2 cents. What I maybe, we can add to some of the wording, but I'd like staff to report back on what they could manage with the current capacity blending or having what Counselor Goida is suggesting. And again, it might be with the staffing, with the capacity we have, this group would be limited to 4 projects a year. And if we know going in that that's, you know, that's what we can handle with staff, same thing, we could be now looking at all the other committees. You know what, we're over our head. Each committee now can only do 3 projects a year, right? That's what we have the capacity to manage. And let's just work within our means instead of trying to hire someone to keep doing more and more things that we don't have the capacity to do. That makes sense.
Councilors?
Yeah, I'm thinking in the timeline, and correct me, Laura, if I'm misspeaking here, but I know at Heritage Committee, we have about 5 meetings a year, give or take. I think we added 1 special one, but I would say that committee with, say, 6 meetings, I don't get the feeling that we have this stop-start process. And I think maybe those meetings are pretty heavy when we have them, but just perspective from me is maybe that's a model that can be used with other committees. I don't notice a huge drop off, not having a meeting every month. Just comment.
Through Mr. Chair, we meet 6 times a year, every other month, so
You have
yes.
to wait till I call him.
Sorry, but he said Laura, so I didn't know if I could jump in. I was really worried. I was like, can I talk? Can I not talk?
He's not sitting here. Thank you for saying through, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think so one thing, we did hear that, the meetings aren't really the work driving the work. It's the actual project, so we might be having a false sense of that by cutting meetings down, we're freeing up, but it depends on the scope of the project. So, I'd be just cognizant of that and just cutting numbers and thinking it's gonna be fine for staff. But also on the flip side, if we, you know, there's councils that don't meet in the summer and they don't meet December because it's getting near, you know, the end of the year. So you could have 7 meetings, but it's kind of heavy in the spring, fall. It doesn't have to be, you know, very linear. So you could tweak that schedule. That way you're meeting frequently enough to progress or to get progress on the action item. Have the summer off because people are on holidays anyways. There's not a lot getting done. Get back at it before December and rinse and repeat. So, I think generally you have direction.
So through Mr. Chair, we're gonna report back on the option of rebranding the rec committee to include mandates around wellness, mental health, geared towards seniors and what that looks like. In terms of maybe revising the terms of reference to make sure that it's within the workload capacity that we currently have. And then also looking at what our overtime hours look like, our capacity, and including a 0.5 FTE in 2025 budget and the potential to add a 0.5 in 26 in order to fund a new position that would be dedicated to the committee coordination. And then again, just in general, looking at how to stay status quo in terms of staffing resources and maybe rejig our terms of reference across our committees to see if we can just limit what initiatives are looking at on an annual basis to stay within our workload capacities.
Have we filled, sorry, John, have we filled the rec committee? I know we have 1 vacancy filled. I would also suggest if we have another vacancy between now and 26 or 7. If you're bringing back any changes to the terms of reference, then we have to put in writing that we find 1 senior candidate, try to get a senior on the committee as well. So I'll leave it there.
Added.
Well, I don't know. Well,
Yeah, my suggestion is a corollary to status quo by reducing the number of times the youth committee meets to 5 and serving the seniors committee at 5.
But I think the biggest component.
No, but again, that's tied to toning down the workload in all the committees. In other words, instead of having, say, 4 projects across 3 committees, have for a total of 12, have 3 for across 4 committees for a total of 12 type of thing.
Okay, so this is going forward, but this seniors committee is still being crafted in 27.
I understand that, but I think Councilor Goyda's current terms is sort of encompassing some of the activities that would be of interest to the seniors. So that's sort of, to me, it's a good place to be right now. We're sort of going incrementally. We got something happening, and then by 2026, bang, we got it.
Yeah, I look for.
So I'll include it in the analysis that we'll bring back, and it will probably be sort of dovetailed in with the limits around initiatives per committee.
Yeah, and steering, I don't know how we steer senior initiatives to the rec committee. It sounds like they're already aligned that way, but in the interim, we're gonna need messaging out there that by either just renaming the committee or something, but
Well,
as a
I
kind of like a
think
Band-Aid.
I think it's got to be tied to the workload. In other words, she's got 2 projects underway that are senior related. And I'm sure we don't want additional projects. In other words, once those 2 get off the board, we'll again bring another 2 on.
Okay.
In other words, to be a very deliberate throttle on the amount of work that's given to them.
I need to see the report from CAO too, so. Councilor Bailey?
Sounds good.
Good.
Clears.
Mhm.
What do you got?
Yep. Yeah, I think I've captured it all. So we're looking at 4 options in the reporting back. One is the option of rebranding the rec committee to include these seniors geared initiatives. We're going to think about adding 0.5 FTE in the next 2 years of the budget in order to have a dedicated committee coordinator position.
We want to see 0.5 in the first draft
Yeah.
of our budget, not think about it.
I think, sorry, through Mr. Chair, in the report, I'm just gonna suggest that it's like an option for council to consider. So I'll make sure this report comes before budget is, like, it'll be this fall, so you guys can consider it and make sure it's included.
Okay, as long as when we have a draft budget, there's a 0.5 of an FTE for a committee member.
Okay, so
Unless
I'm,
they squash it, what are you saying? They're gonna maybe not, like, when this report comes forward, council may decide not to do it.
yes, that's what I'm thinking. And
Okay,
then,
that's fine.
okay,
As long as it's clear that, but the timing,
yes, I know this will have to come quite soon with this report. I just didn't want to,
but it's easier, sorry to interrupt you, but it's easier just to put 0.5 in the budget for an FTE for committees. And then this report isn't under such a strict timeline, because we might start budget ahead of being able to work through this with your team. So if the 0.5 is in the budget, that captures that. It can always be taken out in February. And then it buys you a bit of time with that.
okay. Yeah, I think what I was worried is, through you, Mr. Chair, is that staff didn't want to presuppose that we were going to be increasing our service levels around committees. But we're saying it's just an earmark and it can be removed. Okay,
Right?
okay.
Just won't delay.
Okay, yeah, understood. Thanks. Thank you for that clarification. And then also, we're gonna look at, maybe revising our terms of reference to limit the number of goals and objectives per committee, and then analyze the option to limit youth committee to 5 meetings and seniors committee to 5 meetings, sort of at the same time that we're looking at these amendments to the terms of reference.
Just a question. In the survey, was there a question around whether surveyors saw a difference in a township committee versus an arm's length committee?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we didn't ask anything like that, like a advisory committee versus just an external group
Yeah.
committee. We only stuck to the.
Yeah, I'd just be curious what people would have thought about that.
All good?
Yes.
Anyone else? Anything?
Good discussion.
Good?
Yeah, I'm good, I'm good.
Getting more work?
I volunteered myself
I know.
to do it, right? Like, that's presumptuous, I guess.
All right. None of us might be here, and then so maybe, who knows? Okay, do we have a mover or something?
Our initial mover was Counselor Spillis, seconded by Counselor Goida, but that was the recommendation in the report.
Good.
Any last comments? All right, all in favor? Good, thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day. What are we on?
The sign bylaw, and Justine's gonna
Oh,
walk us
yes,
through the
I do have
presentation.
it here, 9.3.4. Government clerk.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the purpose of this presentation is just to review the third draft of the repeal and replacement of the township sign bylaw. So on the last draft of the bylaw, council posed a question just relating to if the township sign bylaw would apply to County of Wellington properties. And so staff have drafted the bylaw to apply to all properties within the township, with the exception of township owned properties. And this is similar to what you would see in other sign bylaws, even the County of Wellington sign bylaw, which does require municipalities to receive sign permits to erect signs on a county road, just as an example. The next piece of feedback that was received from council was just related to replacing the word produce with product to be more inclusive, related to seasonal farm product signs. So staff have amended that wording to replace it with product, and just added a definition around the seasonal farm product, stating that the sign is permitted to be posted while the product is available for sale on the property. Staff also received feedback from council just whether if there was consideration in the bylaw to regulations of the content of signs. For example, not allowing advertisement of alcohol within a certain distance of a school. So staff don't recommend any further regulations of the content of signs. With that being said, under section 5.2 unauthorized signs, there is a section related to if there's anything that would be obscene on a sign under the criminal code, signs that had defamatory statements, or if there was any symbols included that were protected under the Human Rights Code, so it would not be an authorized sign. Council also asked for some differentiation between billboard signs and large real estate signs. So staff did add clarification under the definition of billboard sign and real estate sign, just noting under each that they don't refer to that type of signage. And further to that, there is a type of sign called a development sign. And so that also differentiates between a billboard versus a large real estate property sign. So development signs are larger signs that are related to a development taking place on that property. So that is included as a separate type of sign with separate regulations. And then finally, with the presentation, this is just the timeline and the steps that we've gone through. So we saw the first draft back in April this year. We conducted our engagement between April 19th and May 17th. We saw the second draft at the July 10th meeting, and this is our final draft being considered for adoption by council at this meeting. And I'll just stop my sharing here. And then I know council was also looking for to see some guides created to assist with those looking to receive these permits, apply for these permits, as well as what some of the applications might look like. And so staff are in the final stages of developing these applications and these guides. So I'll just start with giving a little demo of the temporary sign permit application. So staff have drafted a temporary sign permit guide. And so this guide includes images of what some of the signs look like. We've provided a table of contents which lists the types of signs not requiring a permit, types of signs requiring a permit, and installation requirements. Just bear with me while I scroll. So this first section gives you kind of a definition and an example of what that sign may look like. If we just jump to one of the regulation pages. So for example, we've broken out a garage sign. So garage signs are permitted in the residential or agricultural zone. It lists the timing of when they're allowed to be displayed. lets you know what size is allowed to be displayed, the number, the location, and then notes that illumination is not permitted. So it just takes us from the bylaw and makes it a little bit easier to digest. So jumping from there and developing the webpage. So obviously this page is for types of signs that require permits. So again, just to make things a little bit easier, we've also pulled this out, included the pictures again with the definitions, just so folks can kind of see what they're going to be applying for. At the bottom of this page, we then get to the application. At the top here, depending on which sign you pick, a few options will drop down below. For the most part, the applications are the same regardless of the sign type, with the exception of signs that would require potentially insurance. So for example, an A-frame or T-frame sign that's located on public property does require insurance. And so if you select that, then at the very bottom here, a upload file will show up that will require them to submit that. And so staff are also working on doing a very similar process for permanent signs. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
That's awesome. All right, do you have a recommendation?
That report ADM 2024-049 entitled The Final Draft of the Repeal and Replace of the Township Sign Bylaw be received, and the council give readings to bylaw 2024-062 being a bylaw to regulate signs within the township of West Lynch, and repeal bylaws 9-91, 49-14, 21-18, and 21-2022.
Was one of these bylaws from 1949?
Yes. 2014, sorry, it's bylaw number 49/2014.
No, I definitely needed an update. Give a move for that, please, Councilor Hurst. Councilor Bailey, seconded. Sure. Questions or comments?
No questions. That's really great job on the guide. I think that will be super helpful, even for myself to look through. Yeah, thanks for doing that. I have no concern.
I have no concerns, so really good, took a while to get through and as well with the ethics.
Yeah, my question is, are there that many sign bylaws right now that we're replacing? Or how come there's so many?
So through Mr. Chair, they're all
Versions.
amendments to it, so we have to repeal all of them.
Okay. Do we have right now sort of a lineup of folks that have applied for sign permits that are waiting for this bylaw, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have advised a few folks that this bylaw is coming and they may want to wait to submit their application. So I suspect we'll have a few applications that will come through once this bylaw has been passed.
Okay, oh, and I love the guide. Good job on that.
So I maybe, oh, sorry, Councilor Hurst, go ahead.
Two very minor questions. So the first one is, just so I understand, if somebody applies to the county for a bylaw, how's that work on county land in the township, or is it vice versa? They apply for a sign via the township on county land. I was unclear how that process works.
Through you, Mr. Chair, so a requirement of our permitting process is that if a permit is required from another road authority, such as the county or MTO, then they'll have to provide that as part of their permit here. So they'll have to get permission from the county first, and then
You're basically going through it 2 times if it's on county property within the township. And I'm assuming that's similar to other municipalities in the township, so it wouldn't be an outlier.
correct, yes, this is similar to.
I was unclear on that, so that's helpful just for individuals going through this process. It might be beneficial just to let them know that. And the second, go ahead.
I was gonna say through you, Mr. Chair, kind of another example where you would see that is maybe with our site alteration process. If a permit is required by GRCA, that's a requirement to submit that with your site alteration permit.
That's actually a good build. And the other one was just on the next slide, seasonal farm produce signs 7.1.5, and it's more, the way I was reading it caught me a little funny. So it's the staff recommendation in the smaller font. Seasonal farm product sign means a temporary sign which is posted to promote the sale of farm products on the property where the product is produced, if the product is also available for sale. So if I was reading this literally, if I have a farm produce sign and that produce isn't from that property, they would be in non-compliance. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct. So, staff are looking down the signage. So it's if you're growing corn and you're selling corn from your property, then that's the purpose of the sign.
Gotcha. So if I'm, say, selling sweet corn and that's where my roadside stand is, but it's coming from a farm up the road, I would be in non-compliance?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd have to look at, our zoning bylaw, but I believe, there's also provisions under the zoning related to the product of farm sales, and I believe we're trying to tie these together.
I give you the example, and I saw this driving in here today. So we've got pumpkins on the corner of the roundabout. Obviously, those pumpkins are not grown there, but there was a farm produce sign there. So that in my mind, I'm like, I wouldn't want to take away from them selling pumpkins specifically, not exclusively in a property where they're not. Like, and I think in my mind, I want to be supportive of this type of signage, but the language, if I'm reading it the most literally way possible, I would say that's not allowed. So that was the only piece that I was a little uncomfortable with.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe there's also a number of other signs that might be more appropriate when you're looking at the zoning. So with that being said, I believe the property that you're speaking about is in the CMU zone. And so there might be other signage types that are available to them, either under the temporary sign section that might be more appropriate for the section or in the area that they're advertising.
That's fair. I think I wouldn't want to dissuade people from doing road or selling produce because of a minor nuance that it wasn't actually grown on the property where it's being sold. I get there's larger pieces. We don't want to have random farmers markets in places where they ought not to be or aren't safe to have, but I'll leave it with staff to navigate that one. I think that was just a nuance that I was being like, how's that work?
I don't know if we should leave that. So, I'm in agreement. So I have envisioned, like, maybe that's not the best example because it's in the CMU zone or whatever you call it. But I'm envisioning a, end of farm lane, sales hut. And they grow 10 items, but the 12th and 13th item, they bring garlic in. And then they're advertising the garlic on their signs. They're now not compliant because not everything they're selling is grown on the property. So how do we allow these laneway farm sales if they incorporate some sort of produce product that is brought from a farm? And I'm not gonna put a distance on it, but let's just assume it comes from a farm in Puslinch. Will that make that sign not compliant with the bylaw?
Through Mr. Chair, to simplify it, staff can make an amendment to have it as seasonal farm product sign means a temporary sign, which is posted to promote the sale of farm products on a property.
I would prefer that because I think that we're gonna see that because.
And how do you enforce it?
Well, and I don't know, garlic doesn't grow everywhere. There's certain things that won't grow here, but if you're having a little farm stand and. Right, yeah.
Do you not think that it could potentially, though, still be permitted as like a temporary A-frame sign? Like there's other signs that are permitted that it could still kind of fit within. I don't know.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, staff would be comfortable with changing the wording of the definition. I would also note that seasonal farm product signs are not a sign that requires permitting. So it would be on a complaint basis.
Which then comes into the literal interpretation of it, which I think can lead to problems if staff's comfortable just tweaking that one definition. I think that'll alleviate some headaches. We can always go back in. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Good counselor, for sure.
Another question.
Go ahead, Councilor.
Well, this,
No, go ahead.
your example brought it up. Sorry, I don't know the bylaw by heart. Where does a truck parked with advertising something on the sign fit into the sign bylaw?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the sign bylaw does not contemplate the use of a motor vehicle as a sign.
Okay, so if someone's using a truck or a vehicle to advertise.
But
it's not in compliant, but just complaint based?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I think when we're talking about where a sign is being, like installed, I don't think staff are going to not enforce it simply because it happens to be placed on something other than the ground. So if it's placed on a vehicle or something like that, or the vehicle is displaying the sign, it still has to comply with the terms of the bylaw. So we don't want to create loopholes for folks to be able to just place signs, not on the ground or not on a building and on something else, on a fence, on a car, on whatever. So we would still be in a position to enforce if it wasn't following the rules of the bylaw.
So right now, if there's a vehicle parked advertising something, what tools does staff have to follow up with that?
So through Mr. Chair, it's always gonna be complaint based.
Okay.
So if and until staff receive a complaint about something, we don't proactively enforce.
Yeah, okay.
But if somebody complains about either a vehicle painted as a sign or wrapped, or a pickup truck with a sign in the pickup box parked back up to the road, I think Councilor Bailey's asking, is there enforcement opportunities for the bylaw officer if called to deal with those two situations?
I think that with all bylaws, there's discretion. And so again, we don't want folks finding loopholes and not, and reading bylaws so literally that it precludes us from using that common sense discretion. So we would be looking at it in that way.
Okay, I think what I heard was you can enforce if you choose to.
Without knowing the specifics of the property, the zoning, the permissions, like all of that would be considered, but the bylaw is there to be used as a tool to make sure that there's compliance.
Through Mr. Chair, I misspoke. Actually, the motor vehicle is under the unauthorized signs.
Unauthorized.
So to use it, it would require a variance through council.
I get to.
No, I know, that's why I put up Google Maps, but it's not in the satellite view. In the webpage you're building for the public to see, and it showed a picture of signs that require a permit. And one was the open house, real estate open house. So my question is, how are we going to manage when people call and complain about open house signs on a Saturday and a Sunday? Is the expectation that Jacob's going to be coming in, or whatever bylaw officer is going to be coming in to police real estate signs on the weekends?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, that would be instance where we would address that on the next regular workday.
So, there's something I'm opposed to having the real estate signs in there, and will we be contacting local real estate boards to say, hey, or, I'm not saying we should, but I guess we'll just deal with it on a complaint basis and go forward. Okay, I just didn't want to be incurring all this overtime for open house signs and Jacob running around and. Okay. All right, can we get a move or something?
We do, yes.
Any further questions? All in favor? John. Is it nice to have it off your plate?
Yeah, I was gonna say, check.
Something's finished.
Check.
Done.
No, the guy still.
The guy, you guys do a great job. You built that yourselves, eh? The guy, you do a really nice job.
I would encourage you to at least FYI the local real estate board, because the difficulty we would have here is you'll have some properties that won't be listed locally, but the ones that are listed locally, I think that's a good proactive thing the municipality can do. Let's just push that out there, and then the local agents at least have an understanding of what the new bylaw is. And I think that's just a good gesture to do on behalf of the township.
It'd give them a laundry list of things they should educate the realtors on. What does prime egg mean? No severances. Thanks.
Put that on the email.
Add a memo to the bottom.
All right, 9.3.5.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the purpose of this report is to provide council with information regarding the upcoming conferences for 2025 and to request that council advise staff as soon as possible which conferences they intend to attend. With that being said, the early bird registration for Roma closes on October 31st, 2024, and hotel booking is now available. So staff would be looking for feedback from counselors who are planning to attend Roma as a first starting point.
They don't need to tell you this moment, but they will email you offline. Right? Do you have a recommendation? Are we? Sorry, go ahead.
So through Mr. Chair, there was also a question from a member of council around adding a potential conference. So I'm not sure if it's the best time to bring that up before I read the recommendation, or if you'd just like me to read it as stated.
Sure. Cool. I don't know.
So the conference was the Ontario Association of Committees of Adjustment and Consent Authorities.
So I got that in, because it's, I don't know how good it is, but it might be something of interest because it's a organization that has representation through, from all the various, committee of adjustments and, Senate committees in the province. So I think similar to the Heritage Committee, it might be something to be beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah, and that committee, you know, some of the stuff they decide is binding to the corporation, so.
Well, it is, it's like, the committee of adjustments are legal.
Yeah. So.
Curious, has staff tried to find any like recreation focused conferences or any heritage focused conferences that our members of council here could benefit from?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the Heritage Advisory Committee has the Ontario Heritage Conference as well as the National Trust. The council has approved for members to attend. For the Recreation Advisory Committee, it's the Parks and Recreation Ontario Expedition and Trade Show, and then the annual Parks Education Forum. And then for youth, it's mix.
Great. Okay, cool. Great.
And I haven't read it yet. I can read it for you. Yes, okay. The report ADM 2024-050 entitled 2025 Conferences and Delegations be received. And the council directs staff to bring this report back when dates are known for delegations in order to determine delegation requests as applicable. And the council directs staff to include the Ontario Association of Committees of Adjustment and Consent Authorities in the 2025 operating budget for members of PDAG and C of A.
I want you to amend that. I want you to bring back a recommendation for delegations for Roma. So with your experiences, with the files we've been dealing with, you can prioritize, you know, 3 maybe or something like that. And then if we have to add to it, we'll just help the process a little bit, I think.
Sure.
Does that work? All right. Good.
I don't think we have a member.
Councilor Willis, Councilor Guetta, all in favor? That's carried. Building done. Oh my gosh, I'm tired, man. Lynn joining us? Nice. Always a pleasure to see Lynn. There she.
Thank you so much. So the purpose of this report is for council to authorize staff to proceed to permanently stop up, close, and declare surplus all of the Barnside Road allowance and also a portion of the Cockburn Street Road allowance. And that council deem the road allowances to be surplus to the township's needs with the future intention of disposing of the road allowances. I'm happy to take any questions.
So that report PW 2024-005 entitled Proposed Permanently Stop Up and Close and Declare Surplus Road Allowances part of Cockburn Street and all of Barnside Road be received. And the council authorized staff to proceed to permanently stop up, close, and declare surplus part of the Cockburn Street and all of Barnside Road allowances. And the council gives 3 readings to bylaw 2024-061, being a bylaw to stop up and close part of Cockburn Street and all of Barnside Road allowances. And the council deem the road allowances surplus to the needs of the township with the intention of disposal of the road allowance.
Great. Can we move back? Councilor Bailey, Councilor Hurst, any questions for Lynn?
Just one very brief one, Lynn. How is this decision, is it posted publicly on the access points in the roads? I was wanting to get an understanding of how this is communicated to the broader public.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the township did advertise it in the Wellington Advertiser for 10 days prior to this council meeting. We're not required to anymore under the act, but it's a courtesy that most municipalities still do.
Thank you. I
Um,
appreciate that.
Also, I believe it was also posted on our website.
Thank you.
Great. We have movers here. All right, good. All in favor? Carried. Thanks, Lynn.
Yep, you're welcome.
All right. We're going to 10.1. You have a recommendation for that one?
Yes, so this is the Conservation Halton report regarding the 2025 draft budget summary, and it's to receive for information.
Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Spoulos, Councillor Hurst, questions or comments? All in favor? Next one. Planning report 10.2. Recommendation for that one?
Yes, so this is the County of Wellington Planning Committee report regarding the 2024 provincial planning statement, and staff are recommending to receive it for information, and that council direct staff to provide the report to the township's planning consultant for review and comment to be provided to council at a future meeting.
Awesome. Okay, move for that. Councillor Bailey, Councillor Hurst, any questions or comments? All in favor? Don't you vote on that one?
Next one.
Next one, wrong one. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay. All right, so now we're on 10 point. Hold on, point 3. All right, here we go.
So this is the County of Wellington Planning Committee report regarding the official plan review for 2024 rural residential growth. And this is similar to the previous resolution to be received for information, and that council direct staff to provide the report to the township's planning consultant for review and comment to be provided to council at a future meeting.
Can I get a mover? Councillor Hurst, Councillor Spoulos, any questions or comments? Councillor Spoulos?
Yes, so this deals with the number of substances that were permitted in the township. I was wondering, Mr. Mayor, do you have any updates on the county moving on that front?
So I believe it's in this report that it alludes to that the Hamlet expansion may have an effect on whether that date gets removed or stays status quo. And I called Aldo with my displeasure with that. So my understanding is that those boundary expansions do not need to be justified any longer. The provincial government removed that criteria, so there is a process to follow. You just don't have to have as much data to support it. So generally, if it's something you want in your community, you may be able to get it. So then my argument to staff was that, well, then why is that affecting the decision-making on the severance date? And so what I will say is that I continue to push very hard on the fact that that date, that self-imposed restriction is problematic for our community. And I do believe that county staff continues to look at that, but that's generally all I know, so.
So one of the recommendations of the staff, this report to our township planning consultant review and comment, I would like them to specifically also comment on this fact that there seems to be an impasse between us and the county, and is there a mechanism which we can approach the province to give us a leeway? So I remember way back when there was a comment section to do with this growth plan, and we asked that the province consider where there is a disagreement between the upper tier and the lower tier, that there be some mechanism provided to allow for some mediation, so to speak.
So I agree. What I'm thinking is we already have a report from I believe it's Jesse's. Sorry, it's not a separate report, but in one of his reviews, it states that this date is an outdated component of a policy, for lack of a better word. So I think I would prefer we send communication to the planning department. Maybe get another letter specifically from our consultant identifying that this date is not needed or is an old policy. Reaffirm the resolutions from council that we want it removed and request a response from the county specifically to that date. And then if we don't get the response we want, travel down that road.
Fair enough. I'll go on with that, Mr. Mayor. So, what would be asking is our consultant comment specifically on that date to our council, and then we forward that report to county for specific response. And then if that doesn't work, then we move on here. What are your thoughts?
So if you, Mr. Chair, I think, so I have it captured specifically to comment on the rural residential severance date. And I'd also like to understand how it impacts our growth allocations in general. So I think that's where we get to discuss as staff that we don't have a good understanding of, is this date impacting the growth in other areas of the township, or is it sort of viewed as one whole pot worth of growth for the municipality? And so we wanted to understand the implications, if there are any, to our overall growth abilities with or without this date and what that looks like. I think we just don't have a good understanding of the impacts of it, and wanting to have that from our planner who's doing their review, I think is important.
Yeah, I agree with having our planning address such.
I just remember another component of the conversation. When I called the director at county, there was some reference that the 2051 growth dates, and I asked if they were a ceiling or a minimum. And it's my understanding that the director interpreted that as a ceiling. At the following planning meeting, I asked the planner the same question, and now it's time had passed, they've probably done some research, and I was told at the planning meeting, it's a minimum target. Because that changes the importance of that date. If you have a growth ceiling, then you may want to put in a restriction on how many severances. So as far as I'm concerned, the 2051 forecasted growth is a minimum standard by the province, or minimum target by the province. So thus supports us requesting to remove. And I'm just not quite understanding the angle you're working. You're just trying to ask for clarification on how much growth is associated, or how each component of our growth affects each other. Is that?
So if you're Mr. Chair, and again, wanting clarification, but as I understand it, because we don't have municipal servicing, we don't necessarily have growth that's strictly allocated to our settlement area. We are one big pot for Whistler.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure that by altering a severance date or removing a rural residential severance date, what does that do to our growth allocations in the township, since it's being considered as a whole, not necessarily this is the growth allocation for your settlement areas and versus the rural, knowing that it's not a ceiling and it's growth doesn't necessarily have that ceiling, I think is helpful, but again, wanting our planner to maybe comment on that comprehensively so that we can send that response to the county.
Sure, because I feel there's parts of the PPS that state that growth shall be directed towards the hamlets or whatever their terminology is, settlement areas, there's so many different ones. But, so there's direction from the province to direct the growth to those areas, but then it also gives you the leniency that if that isn't possible, to have the severances. So I get they might be justifying keeping the date in to adhere to the part of the provincial policy that says direct growth to the hamlets, but Morrison's a prime example. It's constrained by the Greenbelt. So I think that's the path. We got a good path forward, and I don't even. I guess we should see. I was gonna say to skip a step to try to get ahead of this, but how quick can Jesse turn this around?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, he's been very, very responsive with our requests, so we'll let him know there's a bit of an urgency to this one, just to get our comments in.
Because planning one of the, oh no, I know land division meets in December, but I'm pretty sure planning only meets in November. So tomorrow's October's meeting. Then the second week in November, then we're not back at the county until January, and the rural component's gonna they're gonna be working through that, so there's definitely some urgency. I think either standalone or embedded in part of the report. I know we've done it already a bunch of times, but our council resolutions, how we work on, all that stuff, because I was a little frustrated when I read this report at first. I felt that they weren't listening. It felt like it wasn't more being listened to, so.
My question, and I think I just heard you say what I was trying to say without not knowing how to say it. I think when I read the report, it talks about the hierarchy of where growth is going to be, allocated. And my question was, how does that severance date impact the hierarchy? And that's kind of what you just were alluding to. Okay, good. I caught up.
Yes.
Only other one, it just occurred to me, I don't disagree with anything I heard, but it was how does this piece coincide with the economic development work that's being done? And I recall a question came up at the public open house around residential expansion to coincide with economic growth and everything that kind of goes along with that. I know that these aren't entirely synced together, but it occurred to me in going through it, this would be something that the municipality can point at in the larger context around the employment land work, that there is a concurrent housing plan in place that is part of the work with the county. So I don't know how one puts that all together, but I think it's an important strategic piece to say, look, there's more than unique projects that work in isolation as part of good planning for the community and the municipality, and they all ought to at some point work together for the larger goal here. So I don't know where that goes. It just occurred to me when I was reading this through that it's probably something that if that topic comes up again, this type of work can get pointed at, that there are strategies and plans in place that are part of the larger scheme of good planning.
And through you, Mr. Chair, on that point, I know that there's this phase 2 that council's looking at for residential. Phase 1 being on the employment land study that we're doing right now. The good side of some of the changes that the province has made is we don't have to go through that intensive study that we've done for employment lands for residential. It can be a scoped down type of work to do that. This certainly is a part of that work. And so it could be that, maybe in advance of us finalizing our employment land study, to maybe set some minds at ease, we could start building that webpage around what's coming soon on the residential side of things and start including information like this so that the public has access to what we're also working on and thinking ahead.
I like that. I think it provides a strategic oversight of all the work that's going on, and often nothing happens at the same time. So it's part of the larger strategy. I'd be quite supportive of that.
Okay. Good. All in favor? She's out, that's right. Excellent. All right. Next, I believe, is mayor updates, right? Don't have much. Staff speak to that because it was a resounding success and we put so much work into it, but Corey and I had a virtual call with the new CAO of Halton Region Conservation. We spent maybe half an hour with her. Great introductory meeting. That's all the intent was. And we got into some details of some not issues, but files that we've been dealing with in the past. But generally, it was just a meet and greet, and we agreed to have some more meetings in the near future to then get into some details around some files that we've dealt with, and maybe even some asks we may have for. I remember a long time ago we asked for some parking on some of those parks. So, anyways, I thought it went well. She seems like a lovely lady, and seems full of energy. So, yeah, it was good. So. Do you want to add anything to that meeting?
No, Good.
Oh, we did do the tour down on last Thursday. A last minute invite to go to concession 2 and a new aqua farming farm. Then we call it farm. Business. Anyways, it's the first in Ontario in an active extracting gravel pit. And so the Minister of Natural Resources was there, all sorts of staff and people from the University of Guelph. Anyway, so Courtney and I attended, and I think that's all I want to say on it at this particular moment, but it was definitely interesting to see that just kind of arriving in the township. But we're gonna.
Water table extraction.
Yeah, that's already a pond. It's in that, which pond is it? Which one? Lancey?
The Lancey pit.
Lancey Pit, and they have the existing one down the street at the McMillan Pit. That one's been there, which I thought was longer. They said 9 years. I thought it was longer than that. So my approach, and I would maybe look to the public if they're watching this, is next summer when the stench becomes maybe unbearable there, to inform the township or myself, and I would love to invite the minister back to experience the full experience of, you know, some of these things. But other than that, what else have we been up to that we can talk about? Patmo. There's
The letter is coming on to this next agenda around the
taxation.
taxation and assessment.
So, the new as executive director has started. I think I mentioned that before. We have some important topics. We've had more meetings with MOF around taxation of aggregate pits. There's a letter coming out on your agenda next end of October. We only received it late last week.
Yeah.
We are meeting. Just ask you today, Thursday, tomorrow. Tomorrow at 1 to discuss how we're going to respond to the letter you're going to see on the 23rd. It has significant impacts to any municipality that has arid operations. I believe we've already informed Ms. Hassan for budgetary reasons, but until it's out officially, I don't want to disclose it like this. But what else? You may have seen Sussex, we hired Sussex for some PR and engagement, so I've been getting them pushed to my phone either through Facebook or some ads around. We need aggregate that works for everyone, so that PR campaign is up and going. But I think Don at the helm, he's gonna start doing the rounds to the top producing municipalities, introducing himself and, you know, trying to get a little more support as well. And we're gonna continue with educating the public on our concerns around the aggregate industry. I reached out to the MNR for enforcement on some of our concerns in the township, and at that aqua farming meeting, staff there said they were working on it. We're gonna get back to them. I sent them another email this morning, so still waiting to hear back, but it's kind of it that we can talk about for now. All right, council members for updates.
You have a question for you.
Shoot.
I saw a post in the ground and something covered in a black garbage bag, but I just wondered if there's an update on the speed camera through Aberfoyle.
This one, we're working through that. I believe they are going to put up the 90-day notice signs soon. So it's likely the 90-day notice sign.
Yeah.
And
I tried to peek through the bag.
it's There's a closed session item where I'm not on that committee any longer, but they're gonna discuss the trigger points, so what speed. It's in the closed session as proposed, so that's a component of getting the program up and running. They have to build that out, but
So we're close to the 90-day notice then.
the start of it.
Yeah, the start of it. Okay,
So,
okay,
as soon as you see those bags come off, then I
Yeah.
believe the 90 days starts.
okay. Getting close.
So and that's why maybe the bag is not, we're still working through a few of the details. For the
Good.
bylaw and things, so
That'll be good.
they added all the other schools in the county to the community safety zones, because originally, how did it work? Anyway, some got left out, whether they. Forget what, there was some technicality in the criteria that excluded some schools, so they added an additional 9 safety zones or something, so. And then the pilot, I believe they're gonna move them around to the different. ones, but as long as you think there's a camera there, then you're gonna go solar, so.
Mhm.
It's good news, it's coming, it's been
Good, good.
5 years, 6 years in the works. All right. Anything from council members? Oh, Expo, can staff want to talk about the Expo? Excellent.
Showcase.
Showcase. I keep calling it an Expo.
Expo 80s.
I'm just aging yourself. Go.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Staff feel that it was very successful. We had close to the 60 vendors we were anticipating and the 3 food trucks as well as our fire department show up. We were trying as best as we could to kind of keep track of the folks that did attend the event, and we attract approximately 300 people attend. We have sent out a thank you to everybody that did participate, asking for any type of feedback. And we have earmarked a date for next year, so we're hoping to host the showcase again next year for the community. We did receive some great feedback as well on how to improve it next year. But we really didn't hear any negative comments per se, just lots of really great feedback and opportunities and ideas for us to take away to make it that much better next year.
Yeah, it was awesome. Anything, Mr. Bailey?
Just, we had the youth committee was in the gym. We were hosting, and so we had more participants than the last event we hosted, so we're just slowly gaining momentum. But yeah, it was great. We had, I don't know, 6 youth members out.
I think or Mr. Chair, I believe that's correct.
Yes, so they came for the whole time and they were there, so that was great. So thanks to them.
Thanks for staff pulling that together. It was awesome. It was really good. The weather held up. It was a good day.
It was perfect.
Fire department did their fire extinguisher training and it was good.
Yeah, on Monday, we did the fire, I was able to attend the fire extinguisher training that was done here with that same equipment that I think they had the day before, so that was really good. I found that to be really good.
Yeah. Thanks again for staff putting it all together. And thanking the vendors. Yeah, I think the only thing I heard was we just more signage next year, but I think you're already aware of that, but that's all we have to worry about. I think we knocked it out of the park. That's great, so. All right, so we have a resolution to receive those verbal updates.
And for you, Mr. Chair, I believe next year's event is maybe gonna be combined with our 175th year anniversary. And so it might be a bit of a more significant event that we hold next year to celebrate sort of a few things. And so it's just a receipt for information.
Okay, moved by Councilor Hurst, Councilor Vita. All in favor? It's carried. All right, bylaws.
Yes, so the following bylaws be taken as read 3 times and finally passed to open council. Bylaw 2024-060 being a bylaw to appoint drinking water source protection risk management inspectors and alternate risk management officials. Bylaw 2024-061 being a bylaw to stop up, close, and declare surplus. Cochran Street, Plan 119, Township of Puslinch and Burnside Road, Plan 119, Township of Puslinch. And bylaw 2024-062 being a bylaw to regulate the installation, display, alteration, repair, maintenance, and removal of signs within the Township of Puslinch. And a bylaw to repeal bylaws 9-91, 49-14, 21-18, and 21-22.
All right, moved by Councilor Bailey, Lewis. All in favor? Carried. Any announcements? Anything coming up that we need to?
Announcement. Maybe I should have done it, but staff have kind of revamped the agenda and I think it's fantastic. I love how all the recommendations and everything are right there on embedded in it. So thanks for that. I think it's helpful to the public too. So anyone wanting to look at the agenda, they can see what's
Make a possible decision, maybe.
right then and there without having to find it. So great job.
Right.
Yes, the council should go into closed session under section 239 municipal act for the purpose of a confidential report regarding proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, and this is related to a proposed acquisition. Confidential verbal report regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. This is related to a bylaw enforcement matter in accordance with section 3.14 of the township's bylaw complaint policy. Confidential verbal report regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, again, in relation to a bylaw enforcement matter in accordance with section 3.14 of the township's bylaw complaint policy. And verbal report regarding the security of the property of the municipality or local board, and this is in relation to the municipal administration office.
Can you move for that, please? Councillor Hurst, Councillor Bailey, all in favor? Carried. So I see some recommendations coming out of close, please.
The council moves into open session at 3:44 p.m.
Okay, mover, please. Councillor Hurst, all in favor? It's carried. Next.
Council receives a confidential report regarding a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board related to the proposed acquisition. The confidential verbal report regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. And this is related to a bylaw enforcement matter in accordance with section 3.14 of the township's bylaw complaint policy. And there was two matters, actually 14.2 and 14.3, that were both in relation to a bylaw complaint matter. And then 14.4, confidential verbal report regarding the security of the property of the municipality or local board, and that's in relation to the municipal administration office, and then staff proceed as directed.
All right, can I get a mover for that? Councillor Hurst, Councillor Bailey, all in favor? That's carried. That was the last one, was that? Any business arising from the closed session? No? Any notice of motion? No? New business? All right, I have something for new business. I believe everybody's seen it. Premier stated that he was giving direction to, I believe, MTO to do a feasibility study on tunneling under the 401. I've asked Ms. White Fox if she could prepare a resolution, or I guess for council to consider at our next meeting in regards to excess soils, because my concerns are, where's all that dirt gonna go? And I'm not familiar with those boring machines, but something tells me they liquefy it to get it out. It mix it with water, no? Does it come out straight dry?
The ground is pretty damp down below.
Okay,
Okay, it's a mixture of type of soils you have. It depends what you have. They got boulders, they use different
heads.
on it to line up the boulders and all that
Okay.
sort of thing. And typically, you're so far down, it's not contaminated. It's a question of compatibility to that soil with where you're taking it, type of thing.
So Ms. Whitebox is gonna drop a whereas and a resolution for us hopefully to consider. Because I think a project of that magnitude, we're going to see that excess fill come to the rural countryside. And where's the appropriate place for it? With our proximity to the GTA. That's all. I think there's nothing else from that they could discuss it.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Just in addition to that, if we're gonna go through the process of writing to the premier about this idea of the tunnel under the 401, can we not use that also as an opportunity to reaffirm the necessity, given what, just the situation last Friday, that maybe they should focus on existing priorities before introducing new?
I'm open to whatever.
Yeah. That was exactly where my head was at. So well said.
You guys see my tweets?
Yep. So I heard.
Nightmare.
Yeah, oh, it was terrible all through the township that day.
I've never seen it backed up.
Yeah, if you have, something you want included in, that discussion, I'd suggest just saying it to Ms. Whitebox to include, so. That's fair, isn't it?
Through Mr. Chair, would you like me to circulate the draft motion in advance so council can provide their thoughts?
Sure. Just have something to add.
No, good.
Just a question, we talked about taking aerial photos when all the traffic is backed up and stuff. Where are we at with being able to do that?
So through Mr. Chair, we're just working with our, the firm that was gonna do the drone footage, just to see how last minute they can go and attend, because I think it is important to be able to capture some of the gridlock that we saw.
Mr. Hurst, did you have some?
Just, support for Councillor Good is.
That the following bylaw be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council. Bylaw 2024-063, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council for the corporation of the township of Westland at its meeting held on the 9th day of October, 2024.
Move for that, Councilor Goya, Councilor Willis, all in favor? Carried, adjournment.
Council hereby adjourns at 3:49 PM.
Councilor Hurst, Councilor Bailey, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you, everyone.